Chapter 32-32. Death descends, there's an assassin in the void. Nye Tian reacted in an instant. He couldn't help but be shocked, and his face stiffened. He had never expected that there would be another powerful cultivator hiding in the void. This expert must have appeared not long ago. Otherwise, he would have been exposed when the void vibrated. Cold Moon Ghost Killer, die. At this moment, a deep and cold voice resounded in the void. It was filled with an extremely gloomy aura that made people shudder. Swoosh! Immediately, a sharp light with death chi appeared and flickered in the void. Then, it disappeared strangely. Nye Tian's eyes suddenly darkened. He felt an absolute killing force appear and directly attack his throat, causing his face to involuntarily tremble. He was incomparably shocked. In an instant, the death chi became extremely strong, as if the death god had arrived in an instant. Nye Tian reacted instantly and moved his body slightly to the side. Puff! In the next moment, the death chi flashed like a ray of light and directly pierced through his shoulder. Blood gushed out and dyed half of his body red. Nye Tian's body trembled and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face turned as pale as paper in an instant. He looked extremely weak. The death chi that pierced through his chest was obviously not an ordinary force. It seemed to be able to weaken his martial body and bloodline in an instant. It was extremely terrifying. Nye Tian. Feng Wanhong, who was far away, could not help but exclaim when he saw Nye Tian injured. Don't come over. Nye Tian suddenly raised his hand and signaled Feng Wanhong not to come over. The assassin hiding in the void was extremely terrifying. The death chi that he released was even more terrifying. It made Nye Tian feel an unprecedented threat. At this moment, a surprised voice sounded in the dark space. It seemed to be a little doubtful. Nye Tian was pierced by the death chi, but he did not die. This guy, how can his martial body be so strong? It can actually resist the corrosion of the death god's aura. The injured grim-faced martial artist's expression changed to one of extreme fear. Even he could not resist the aura of the Grim Reaper. Once his martial body was invaded, his bloodline would be devoured in an instant. However, Nye Tian was actually able to forcefully resist the aura of the Grim Reaper. This was truly too frightening. Nye Tian's martial body was comparable to a fierce beast. But Nye Tian was only a rank 5 pseudo-holiness, and he was a cultivator who had grown up in a realm. Boom! At the same time, Nye Tian's body shuddered violently. Following this, a black aura was emitted from his body, and his pale face became slightly better. How is this possible? In the void, a shocked voice rang out once more. The lurking martial artist was really too surprised. Not only had Nye Tian not been corroded by the Grim Reaper's aura, he had even forcefully forced out the Grim Reaper's aura. It was simply inconceivable. Are you surprised? Nye Tianling laughed. His eyes flickered coldly as he said fiercely, "It turns out that you so-called geniuses of the sacred world are only SOSO. Today, I'll personally tear apart your pride layer by layer. I'll let you see how petty and lowly you are after you strip away your so-called pride." The voice resounded in the void like an alarm bell. Feng Wanhong and the others were shocked. Their eyes trembled as their blood slowly boiled in their hearts. Nye Tian was indeed terrifying. Even when facing a cultivator of the sacred world, he was still unyielding and fearless. Is that so? A sinister voice rang out in the void. It was sharp and oppressive. I'd like to see how an ant from a realm like you can tear apart the pride of the cultivators of the sacred world. Nye Tian furrowed his brows and spread his divine sense, trying to sense the location of the cultivator hiding in the void. What he had said earlier was not only to show his resistance, but also to provoke the lurking martial artist. However, the lurking martial artist was clearly very cunning. He purposely concealed his aura, and his voice also came from all directions. It was very strange, so Nye Tian could not lock onto his position. Ant from a realm, I originally wanted to let you die a quick death, but I've changed my mind now." Then, the sinister voice rang out again. It said coldly, "I'll torture you slowly, abuse you, and let you die slowly." "Just you? How dare a cowardly scoundrel say such words? You're really boasting shamelessly." Nie Tianling laughed. His aura surged wildly, and strands of sword intent condensed into an invisible shield to protect his body. In the next moment, the person in the void was clearly enraged and growled, "You're courting death!" Whoosh! Then, a ray of grim reaper chi appeared in the air. After a flash of black light, it disappeared. It was strange and chilling. Nie Tian opened his demonic eye and saw a sharp black blade appear. Wherever it passed, it tore through the void. It was extremely sharp. His figure moved slightly, but he was still a step too slow. His shoulder was directly pierced, and blood gushed out. An ant will always be an ant. An ant can only be trampled and humiliated. Then, a sinister voice rang out in the void. It was incomparably cold, as if thousands of ghosts were wailing, making people feel uneasy. Again, Nie Tian's body shook, and he forced out another ray of grim reaper chi. Like a wild beast, he growled in a low voice. As soon as he finished speaking, another stream of death god aura appeared and pierced through his shoulder once more. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Then, several rays of grim reaper chi pierced through the air and attacked. More and more wounds appeared on Nie Tian's body. In the blink of an eye, his entire body was covered in blood. However, each ray of grim reaper chi failed to hit his vitals. Although he looked seriously injured, in reality, his injuries were not fatal. However, in the eyes of the others, Nie Tian was already seriously injured and did not have long to live. "Die, you ant!" At that moment, a furious voice echoed out from afar. A black-robed figure appeared and charged towards Nie Tian furiously. He slammed his palm down, sending out a raging wave of energy that seemed to carry the power to destroy heaven and earth as it shot towards Nie Tian. The person who attacked was the Grimace cultivator who had been seriously injured by Nie Tian previously. Good timing! Nie Tian suddenly raised his head, his eyes flashing with a cold light. He was incomparably fierce. 9 limits of starry sky, 6th limit, sun annihilation. The next moment, the corner of his mouth twitched. He raised the starry sky slash in his hand, causing the void to tremble and the earth to tremble. The 4th limit, falling star, the 5th limit, falling moon, and the 6th limit, sun annihilation, were released at the same time. Nie Tian had already used falling star and falling moon previously. Now, he was using the 6th limit, sun annihilation. How can this be? The Grimace cultivator, who was in the air, suddenly felt a terrifying murderous intent. His eyes trembled and his voice trembled. Boom! Unfortunately, it was too late. A terrifying sword shadow appeared. The sword of sun annihilation descended from the void like a volcanic eruption, releasing a terrifying destructive power that directly pressed towards the Grimace cultivator. Nie Tian had pretended to be weak just for this moment. Chapter 32-33. Going crazy. Finally out. Nie Tian's eyes flickered when he heard the voice of the cultivator hiding in the dark. He first pretended to be weak to lure the injured cultivator out, then killed him to lure out the person hiding in the dark. Everything was going according to his plan. Don't you think you're amazing? Today I'll trample on your pride. With a thunderous roar, Nie Tian flapped his wings like a wild beast and charged towards the injured man with the ghost face. Bang! There was a dull sound, and the masked cultivator flew back under the attack of the Yang extinguishing sword. His entire body was covered in blood, looking very miserable. Just at this moment, Nie Tian's figure actually arrived. He stepped out and stomped on the masked cultivator. Nie Tian intended to use the same method to torture and kill this grim-faced martial artist. With a thunderous roar, Nie Tian stomped towards the grim-faced cultivator. You said that we cultivators from the realms are ants? Let's see what you'll be like when you're trampled by us. Boy, you dare. The grimace cultivator's eyes trembled as the shock in his heart increased to the extreme. One could imagine how ugly the face beneath the grimace was. Why wouldn't I dare? Nye Tian Tianling laughed and said with a sinister look, I, Nye Tian, love to trample on arrogant geniuses. Bang! Right after Xiao Chen spoke, his figure arrived, and he really stepped on the grimace cultivator's face. The grimace mask shattered, revealing an extremely ugly face. In the face of Nye Tian's strength, the grim-faced martial artist's pride and arrogance were so fragile. Is this your pride? Is this your martial Tao? Do you still dare to be so arrogant after I stomp on your head? Nye Tian let out a furious roar as if he had lost his mind. As he stomped on the cultivator's face completely caved in. The light in his eyes gradually disappeared. Nye Tian had actually trampled the ghost-faced martial artist to death with brute force. Before he died, his face was completely twisted, and one could still see how humiliated and unwilling he was. Being trampled to death by an ant that he looked down upon, one could well imagine his feelings before he died. Bastard! You're courting death. Another cultivator with a grimace appeared in the void. When he saw his companion being trampled to death by Nye Tian, he immediately became enraged. He roared like an enraged ferocious beast. Are you going crazy? Nye Tian suddenly turned around and looked coldly at the cultivator with the ghost mask. His lips curled into a sinister smile, and the demonic aura in his demonic eye became even denser. He had used such a cruel method to kill the grim-faced cultivator. On one hand, it was to vent his anger, and on the other hand, it was to enrage the person who was hiding. Anger was sometimes a good thing to stimulate one's potential, but most of the time, anger was fatal. You ant, you deserve to die. The cultivator with the ghost mask was completely enraged by Nye Tian. He roared like thunder, and his figure suddenly moved. His entire body was shrouded in a terrifying deathly aura. It was extremely terrifying, and his entire person looked like a huge deathly aura vortex. Swish! In the next moment, a stream of death god chi appeared in the void and condensed into an extremely sharp blade that slashed towards Nye Tian. However, Nye Tian did not dodge. Instead, the astral soul wings on his back vibrated, and he directly charged forward. Pooh! In the next instant, the deathly aura penetrated his body, and blood dyed his entire body red. However, he showed no fear, and his speed increased. He was like a wild beast that had just escaped from its cage, fiercely pouncing forward. You! The cultivator with the ghost mask obviously did not expect Nye Tian to be so ferocious. He exclaimed in shock, but could not say a word. Whoosh whoosh whoosh! Nye Tian did not speak at all. Instead, he stretched out his hand, and suddenly, 9 bone-eroding soul-shackling chains appeared, directly blasting towards the cultivator with the ghost mask. Bang bang bang! The cultivator with the ghost mask did not have time to react, and his figure was directly sent flying. His shoulders were even pierced by the bone-eroding soul-shackling chains, and his entire body was covered in blood. It was a tragic scene. This cultivator with the ghost mask was obviously someone who was proficient in hiding. He was not good at fighting head-on, and was much weaker than the other two. In their first head-on clash, he was completely defeated by Nye Tian. I understand now. You actually have heavenly Tao energy in your body, no wonder you can force out the deathly aura. After the cultivator with the ghost mask stabilized his body, his face was as pale as paper, and he looked at Nye Tian in horror. Previously, he had been very curious as to why his deathly aura had no effect on Nye Tian's body. Instead, it was forced out by Nye Tian. Now that he was close to Nye Tian, he actually sensed a strong aura of heavenly Tao energy from the latter's body. The deathly aura's greatest nemesis was the heavenly Tao energy. His strength was completely suppressed by Nie Tian. Isn't it a little too late to realize this now? The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched and he sneered coldly. His eyes were filled with intense murderous intent. The cultivator with the ghost mask was right. The reason why Nie Tian was able to force out the deathly aura was because of the heavenly Tao formation in his body, as well as the 9 heavenly Tao shackling chains. If it were not for that, the terrifying deathly aura would have severely injured Nie Tian, even if it could not kill him. Die. At that moment, Nie Tian let out a deep roar, and directly lashed out with his sword, aiming at the cultivator with the ghost mask. Boom. However, at that instant, a terrifying sword shadow suddenly appeared in the void, piercing through the sky. Its powerful aura was extremely terrifying, causing the void to tremble violently. Nie Tian frowned slightly, and he could not help but frown. In this sword shadow, he actually felt a trace of a familiar aura. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, 3 terrifying forces appeared high up in the sky, suppressing the void. It was as if the void was struck by a thunderous roar. Bang! Nie Tian's eyes focused slightly, but he did not stop there. The terrifying sword shadow landed directly, and after a dull thud, the cultivator with the ghost mask was directly blasted into a bloody light, leaving nothing behind. Kaboom! Bang bang bang! Almost at the same time, 4 terrifying forces collided high up in the sky. After the heavens and earth shook, a series of terrifying waves appeared, surging in all directions, and wreaking havoc in the void. The wings on Nie Tian's back flapped, and he quickly retreated a few thousand meters, avoiding the direct impact. After his figure stabilized, he suddenly looked up into the sky, where 3 cultivators with ghost masks appeared at the same time, standing coldly in the sky. Each of their bodies surged with a terrifying aura. On the other side, a swordsman stood still. His clothes were whiter than snow, and his entire body was surging with a chilling aura of sword intent. He stood there like a cold sword, indifferent to the extreme, heartless to the extreme. Previously, when the 3 cultivators with ghost masks attacked Nie Tian at the same time, it was the white-robed swordsman who had blocked the attack for Nie Tian. This white-robed swordsman had blocked the 3 cultivators with a single stroke of his sword. His strength was imaginable. Bailey Shengxue. On the other side, Feng Wanhong's eyes trembled when he saw the white-robed swordsman, and he called out his name. Chapter 32-34. Bailey Xingxue. Feng Wanhong stared at Bailey Xingxue, who had suddenly appeared. He could not help but be stunned. Bailey Xingxue was a legendary figure in the Myriad Domain Association. Back then, he had been one of the 9 young masters when he was less than 1,000 years old. Furthermore, in a few years, he had defeated the other 8 people and become the leader of the 9 young masters. The reason why Feng Wanhong had gone into seclusion for 10,000 years was partly because he had been defeated by Bailey Xingxue. He was a martial genius with a high temperament. However, he had been defeated by a martialist who was much younger than him. Of course, his martial heart had suffered a setback. However, when he came out of seclusion after 10,000 years and saw how powerful Bailey Xingxue was, he did not feel good. The grim-faced martialists were very powerful. Feng Wanhong found it very difficult to deal with one. However, Bailey Xingxue had broken the combined attack of 3 grim-faced martialists with a casual sword strike. His strength could be imagined. Bailey Xingxue, you are indeed the leader of the 9 young masters. Feng Wanhong's eyes trembled as he thought to himself. No matter how proud he was, he had to admit that he was weak in front of absolute strength. Bailey Xingxue was indeed much stronger than him. This person's sword intent is actually... Nie Tian looked at Bailey Xingxue with trembling eyes. He was very surprised. After a pause, he thought to himself, it is actually very similar to Senior Eternally Merciless. When Bailey Xingxue made his move earlier, Nie Tian had felt a familiar sword intent aura. Now, when he felt Bailey Xingxue's sword intent again, he was even more shocked. Bailey Xingxue's sword intent aura was very similar to Eternally Merciless. Could he be related to Senior Eternally Merciless? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he thought to himself. At that moment, Bailey Xingxue looked at Nie Tian and said, "You can leave them to me." His voice was calm, but firm and domineering. Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he slowly retreated. After killing 3 masked cultivators in a row, Xiao Chen's energy was almost depleted. It was clearly impossible for him to deal with 3 masked cultivators at the same time. Bailey Xingxue was very strong. Even if he were to face 3 ghost-faced cultivators at the same time, he should still have the strength to spare. At this moment, a grimace cultivator stepped forward and looked at Bailey Xingxue with a gloomy expression. "Do you think you can fight against the 3 of us by yourself?" he asked cold. "Make your move." Bailey Xingxue's face was calm and his eyes were incomparably cold without the slightest ripple. It was as if the people standing before him were not experts, but 3 lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Arrogant! The masked martial artist was instantly enraged, and he roared furiously, "A mere realm ant dares to act so arrogantly in front of us? You're courting death." Boom! Right after he spoke, the masked cultivator moved, directly attacking Bailey Xingxue. Space trembled, and a horrifying energy exploded out. It was vast and mighty like a tsunami. However, facing such a horrifying power, Bailey Xingxue's face was still indifferent. The next moment, a sharp sword appeared in his hand. The moment the sword essence burst out, an extremely sharp aura spread out, filling the space within a radius of tens of thousands of meters. It was extremely terrifying. Such a strong sword intent. Nie Tian's expression flickered, and his eyes narrowed. Bailey Xingxue's sword essence was terrifying. That kind of sharpness and ruthlessness was exactly the same as that of Eternally Merciless. However, compared to Eternally Merciless, Bailey Xingxue was still slightly weaker. Even so, his sword essence was more than enough to kill the grimace cultivator. Swoosh! Then, the sword in Bailey Xingxue's hand trembled, and a ray of sword light bloomed. A cold and ruthless aura surged out, like invisible ripples surging in the void. The entire space was filled with a desolate, murderous aura, making people feel despair seep into their souls. How could this be? The masked cultivator's eyes trembled, and his lips trembled, but he couldn't say anything else. He felt a chill in his throat, and suddenly blood gushed out. Without any ability to resist, the life in the masked cultivator's eyes instantly disappeared, and he died a tragic death. Feng Wanhong was shocked by the scene in front of him, and he sucked in a breath of cold air. Even his tailbone felt cold. He knew that the current Bailey Xingxue was no longer the same as before, but he didn't expect Bailey Xingxue to be so terrifying. So strong. Nie Tian was also shocked by this scene, and the corners of his mouth twitched as he exclaimed. Bailey Xingxue's strength was simply terrifying. His sword Dao had already reached the transcendent profound realm, which could be called abnormal. Bailey Xingxue should be just over 10,000 years old, but his strength already stood at the peak of the myriad domains. In the myriad domains, other than Eternally Merciless, who could firmly suppress Bailey Xingxue, no one else was necessarily a match for him. Even Ye Fenghua might not be stronger than Bailey Xingxue. After reaching the peak of martial arts, swordsmen are indeed the strongest. The corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched and he thought to himself, "It's your turn." At this moment, Bailey Xingxue's eyes turned cold, and without the slightest emotion, and he looked at the other 2 grimace cultivators. The 2 grimace cultivators' eyes trembled, and they looked as if they were still in a state of shock. They couldn't believe that there was such a terrifying cultivator in the domain. "You're not going to make a move?" The corners of Bailey Xingxue's mouth twitched, and he said coldly, "If you don't make a move, then it's my turn." Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, Bailey Xingshue's sword suddenly thrust forward, and a cold sword intent with a murderous aura attacked the two grimace cultivators. The sword intent split into two in the air, and accurately locked onto the two grimace cultivators' throat. At Bailey Xingshue's level, his sword Dao was already close to the peak. His control of the sword intent was precise, and there would be no deviation. Pooh! Pooh! In the next instant, the sound of flesh being sliced was heard. The two grimace cultivators didn't even have time to react before their throats were slit. With a single move, Bailey Xingxue had killed 3 grimace cultivators. When Nye Tian, Feng Wanhong, and the others saw the scene in front of them, the shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. Bailey Xingxue's strength was simply unimaginable. Feng Wanhong even felt that even the leader of the Myriad Domains Guild might not be able to defeat Bailey Xingxue. Previously, Nye Tian had also killed 3 grimace cultivators, but it had been extraordinarily difficult for him to kill them. As for Bailey Xingxue, it was as easy as slaughtering chickens and dogs. At this moment, Bailey Xingxue stood in the air. As his name suggested, he wore a robe whiter than snow, and stood with his hands behind his back. The sword intent in his body was completely withdrawn, but it still couldn't conceal its sharp aura. In the next moment, he suddenly turned around and looked at Nye Tian. His cold gaze suddenly trembled, as if his state of mind had changed slightly. Nye Tian could sense the change in Bailey Xingxue's expression, and he couldn't help but squint his eyes, feeling curious. Chapter 32-35. A fateful battle. High up in the sky, Bailey Xingxue's white robe fluttered in the wind. His sword intent surged, and his whole body surged with an extremely sharp aura. At this moment, his eyes were fixed on Nye Tian. The coldness in his eyes faded a little, and was replaced by a trace of passion. It seemed that he had discovered something unusual about Nye Tian. Nye Tian's expression improved a little. Looking at Bailey Xingxue, he couldn't help but frown and ask, "Do we know each other? We didn't know each other before, but we will soon." The corner of Bailey Xingxue's mouth twitched. The passion in his eyes disappeared, and was replaced by extreme coldness. He said, "You and I are destined to have a fateful battle." A fateful battle? Nye Tian couldn't help but be startled when he heard Bailey Xingxue's words. He and Bailey Xingxue didn't know each other, and this was the first time they met. Why would Bailey Xingxue talk about a fateful battle? Moreover, Nye Tian wasn't a fatalist. He didn't believe that they were destined to be enemies or friends. Nye Tian, neither of us can escape. Bailey Xingxue's expression was cold. The sharpness in his eyes seemed to weaken a little, and was replaced by a trace of gloominess. He said, "Your sword intent is the most terrifying among all the swordsmen I've ever seen. Even eternally merciless may not be your match if he suppresses his sword intent to the same level as yours. I hope you can reach the height that your father, Nye Fenghua, couldn't. I'm looking forward to seeing your growth." The calm voice contained a trace of subtle meaning. Nye Tian looked at Bailey Xingxue with even more doubt in his eyes. He was confused about what Bailey Xingxue was talking about, but he still understood a little. Bailey Xingxue knew eternally merciless, and he also knew Nye Fenghua. Judging from Bailey Xingxue's tone, he was very familiar with eternally merciless and Nye Fenghua. However, Nye Tian couldn't tell if Bailey Xingxue was a friend or foe. It seemed that there was some kind of competition between Bailey Xingxue, eternally merciless, and Nye Feng. And now, this competitive relationship had extended to Nye Tian. Perhaps Bailey Xingxue didn't regard Nye Tian as an opponent yet. But in the near future, Nye Tian would definitely become Bailey Xingxue's opponent. What did the seemingly illusory fated battle really mean? Nye Tian, you don't have to think too much. Right now, the most important thing for you is to increase your strength. Bailey Xingxue saw through Nye Tian's doubts. His lips trembled as he said, "When your strength is comparable to mine or eternally merciless, you will naturally know everything. I can tell you right now that your father, Nie Fenghua, is currently experiencing unimaginable pain. But this is a path that he must go through. Only by walking down that path can he break through his own limitations. And you, in the near future, will walk the same path as your father. Nie Tian's gaze suddenly darkened, and his expression turned ugly. What was Nie Fenghua going through right now? What did Bailey Xingxue know? Eternally merciless, Bailey Xingxue and Nie Fenghua, what secrets were hidden behind these three people? Nie Tian felt as if his brain was about to explode, and he suddenly felt uneasy. Nie Tian, you can't help Nie Fenghua. That is his own path, and he must walk it himself. Bailey Xingxue said in a cold voice, what you can do now is to increase your strength as quickly as possible. In this world, as long as you have enough strength, you can be fearless. Just like eternally merciless, even a saint is like a chicken or a dog in front of him. And these myriad ghosts flow together people are just a bunch of clowns that can't even be seen in public. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He looked at Bailey Xingxue and asked in a deep voice, how do you know about the myriad ghosts flow together? The myriad ghosts flow together was the organization that these ghost-faced martial artists belonged to. However, these ghost-faced martial artists were clearly from the holy world. How did Bailey Xingxue know about them? The myriad ghosts flow together is a force from the holy world. These ghost-faced martial artists all came from a crack in the holy world, so their strength is very weak, Bailey Xingxue said coldly. A crack in the holy world? Nie Tian was stunned. He didn't know what it was. Bailey Xingxue's lips twitched, but he didn't say anything. It was obvious that he didn't want to tell Nie Tian too much. A crack in the holy world is a space-time tentacle that extends from the holy world and seeps into the realms. It is equivalent to a passage between the holy world and other realms. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice sounded, and he explained, within the crack in the holy world, there is an extremely strong space-time storm. The stronger the martial artist, the stronger the space-time storm. Therefore, those who can pass through the crack in the holy world are all below the sage realm. If a peak sage realm expert wants to pass through the crack in the holy world, he will cause a large-scale space-time storm. If he is lucky, he will cause space-time to collapse. If he is unlucky, he may even threaten the existence of the entire holy world. Under normal circumstances, martial artists of the holy world are not allowed to enter realms. I don't know what kind of force the myriad ghosts flow together is, but they must have sneaked into the realms. If news of this gets out, the old monsters that guard the holy world will probably destroy the myriad ghosts flow together. Nie Tian listened to the Ghost Emperor's words with a blank expression. He didn't understand. He knew too little about the holy world. However, he still understood the core information. The crack in the holy world was a passage between the holy world and realms. Martial artists of the holy world were not allowed to enter realms. The myriad ghosts flow together must have taken such a huge risk to come to the Tianqing realm. They must have an ulterior motive. The Ghost Emperor sighed and didn't say anything else. If I'm not wrong, the myriad ghosts flow together must have come for the heaven and earth sacred veins. It must be the aura of the heaven and earth sacred veins. It's so strong that even the holy world is alarmed, Bailey Xingxue said. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he thought to himself, maybe. The heaven and earth sacred veins were good stuff. They were rare even in the holy world. It wasn't strange that the myriad ghosts flow together were interested in the heaven and earth sacred veins. Nie Tian, Feng Wanhong, take a rest and get ready to enter the heaven execution forbidden land, Bailey Xingxue said as he glanced at Nie Tian and Feng Wanhong. You want to enter the heaven execution forbidden land? Feng Wanhong was stunned when he heard Bailey Xingxue's words. Did you get the president's permission? With my current strength, do I still need the president's permission? Bailey Xingxue asked coldly and domineeringly. Feng Wanhong's gaze shook while his face was filled with astonishment, and he was speechless. Bailey Xingshue's strength was no weaker than the president of the Myriad Domains Guild. Moreover, he didn't need the president's permission. Chapter 32-36. The Forbidden Array Collapses. Bailey Xingshue's face was indifferent. His tone contained an inviolable overbearingness, giving off a strong sense of oppression. Shang Lai and Shang Nana were stunned. They didn't expect Bailey Xingxue to ask them to leave. To put it nicely, he was asking them to leave, but to put it bluntly, he was chasing them away. Brother Nye Tian, this. Shang Lai didn't dare to speak to Bailey Xingxue. He could only look at Nye Tian. Brother Shang, the heaven punishment forbidden ground is no small matter. You should leave, said Nye Tian in a deep voice. They were going to enter the heaven punishment forbidden ground, and bringing Shang Lai and Shang Nana with them was indeed a burden. Letting them leave was actually for their own good. Big brother, let's go, Shang Nana whispered to Shang Lai. She wasn't stupid. She could tell the difference between her and Shang Lai and Nye Tian. Even Nye Tian wouldn't be able to protect them at all times after entering the heaven punishment forbidden ground. Therefore, the wisest decision was to leave now. Brother Nye Tian, we'll be leaving then. Shang Lai thought for a moment, then bade farewell to Nye Tian and left. Leave the heaven punishment mountain range. It's not safe here. Bailey Xingxue shouted at the back of the Shang siblings. Although he looked cold on the surface, he was actually a meticulous person. Following that, Nye Tian and Feng Wanhong sat cross-legged on the ground and entered a state of cultivation. The two of them were heavily injured in the previous battle and urgently needed to recover. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Nye Tian and Feng Wanhong stood up. Their auras were almost fully recovered. Especially Nye Tian. His aura was sharp and he had completely recovered. We're almost recovered. Let's enter the forbidden ground. Bailey Xingxue scanned Nye Tian and Feng Wanhong with his divine sense, and his eyes flickered with surprise. He was very shocked. Nye Tian's martial body was actually so powerful. He had consumed so much energy and suffered such heavy injuries. Yet, he was able to completely recover in just 3 days. Nye Tian's martial body was already very powerful to begin with. Furthermore, not long ago, he had been tempered by the power of the heaven punishment, causing his martial body to become even more terrifying. Even Bailey Xingxue couldn't compare to Nye Tian in terms of martial physique. Subsequently, Nye Tian and the others arrived outside the dense forest's forbidden array. A formation scroll appeared in Bailey Xingxue's hand and he opened it. Suddenly, a mysterious formation aura surged in the air. Nye Tian was stunned for a moment. It turned out that Bailey Xingxue actually had the diagram of the forbidden array formation. It seemed that Bailey Xingxue had come directly for the forbidden land of heaven punishment this time. Did he know what was in the heaven punishment forbidden land? Follow me. Bailey Xingxue said after memorizing the structure of the forbidden formation. He then prepared to enter the formation. However, at that instant, the nervous voice of the Ghost Emperor could be heard in Nye Tian's divine sense. Wait. Wait. Nye Tian's eyes glistened as he immediately yelled. Bailey Xingxue's figure came to a stop. He turned around and looked at Nye Tian. What's wrong? Back off. At the same time, the voice of the Ghost Emperor could be heard once again. Back off. Nye Tian immediately reacted and yelled. Bailey Xingxue and the others were startled, with strange expressions on their faces. What was wrong with Nye Tian? Why was he so nervous all of a sudden? Bang! At that instant, the forbidden array in the dense forest shuddered all of a sudden. Following this, a dull explosion could be heard all of a sudden, causing the surroundings to tremble violently. Back off. Bailey Xingxue frowned his eyebrows and was startled for a moment. His expression became strange, before he let out a roar and flew backward like an arrow. Feng Wanhong and Luo Ho were aware that something was not right. They immediately flew backward into the sky. Nye Tian was even faster. With a flap of the wings on his back, he had already retreated a few 10,000 meters away. Bang! Bang! As Nie Tian and his crew backed off, the forbidden array in the dense forest shuddered even more vigorously. Following this, it was unable to withstand the force and shattered into pieces. A ferocious force appeared in the sky, which transformed into a ripple of energy spreading into the surroundings. Bang! Bang bang bang! The terrifying ripple shattered the rocks and toppled the trees, causing the place to turn dark. The entire place was filled with explosions, as if the end of the world was approaching. Nie Tian and his crew stood in the sky and frowned as they stared at the scene below. They had no idea what was going on. Why would the forbidden array in the dense forest collapse all of a sudden? Bang! Crack crack crack! At this moment, a terrifying sound could be heard. It was as if a boundless power had appeared from the ground and shot up. A crack appeared on the ground, and then it expanded. In the blink of an eye, a huge ravine was formed. Bang bang bang, chi chi chi. The place continued to rumble as a ferocious force wreaked havoc, causing sand and pebbles to fly everywhere. Nie Tian and his crew were confused as they stared at the scene of destruction. A while later, the violent force gradually calmed down, allowing the surrounding space to return to normal. However, the forbidden array in the dense forest had disappeared, as if it had never existed in the first place. A giant ravine that was a few 100,000 meters long and a few thousand li wide had appeared on the ground. From above, it looked like a canyon. Feng Wanhong took a deep breath and calmed down after a while, before he said, "What kind of force is this? Why is it so powerful?" Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue wore stern expressions. Neither of them spoke. Luckily, the Ghost Emperor had warned them in time. Otherwise, Nie Tian and his crew would have been buried in the forbidden array. Imagine if they were still inside the forbidden array and it suddenly collapsed, they would not have a chance to survive. What exactly is that terrifying force? A moment later, Bailey Xingxue spoke in a deep voice. His cold eyes were filled with a hint of fear. The destruction of the forbidden array in the dense forest was caused by that terrifying force. Even the ravine on the ground was caused by it. However, where did that terrifying power come from? Master Nie Tian, I can feel that the force came from underground. Luo Ho came to Nie Tian's side and said with a fiery gaze. Although Bailey Xingxue was in the dominant position, Luo Ho felt that Nie Tian was easier to get along with, thus he chose to talk to Nie Tian. Underground. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he stared at the crack on the ground with a solemn expression. Could it be the force of the sacred veins? The heaven and earth saint veins were located underground, and the power of the destructive forbidden array also came from underground. Could this be a coincidence? Chapter 32-37. 9 Lives Demon Cat. Bailey Xingxue's figure disappeared into the crack in an instant. Nie Tian stared at Bailey Xingxue's figure with a worried look on his face. Bailey Xingxue was very powerful, but no one knew what was underground. After all, the sacred meridians were born from the heavens and earth. Therefore, it was normal for something powerful to appear around them. Master Nie Tian, is Master Xingxue going to be fine? After a long time, Bailey Xingxue's figure still hadn't appeared. Luo Ho couldn't help but panic a little. It's fine. Nie Tian's lips twitched, but he did not say anything else. At that moment, he also had a bad premonition in his heart. However, he had to remain calm. Meanwhile, Feng Wanhong wore a solemn expression. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking. Meanwhile, in the crack, Bailey Xingxue's figure had arrived at the crack tens of thousands of meters below. Why is this crack so deep? Bailey Xingxue steadied his figure and looked down. All he could see was endless darkness. He had never imagined that the crack in the ground that had just appeared would be so deep, as if it led to a bottomless hell. This undoubtedly meant that the terrifying force that had just appeared was even more powerful. It was able to destroy the forbidding formation and crack the ground in an instant. One could easily imagine how powerful it was. Let's keep going. Bailey Xingxue took a deep breath and murmured, before he continued to fly downward. He decided that if he did not find anything after another 10,000 meters, he would return. This huge crack gave him a very uneasy feeling. A moment later, Bailey Xingxue uttered a cry of surprise as his expression changed. He simply did not dare to believe that a shadow had actually flashed in front of him just now. How is this possible? This is 100,000 meters below the ground, and the crack was just formed. How could there be something else? Roar! Just as Bailey Xingxue was feeling bewildered, an ear-piercing shriek suddenly rang out in the sky. Following which, a black ray of light appeared in the sky and shot towards Bailey Xingxue's throat. Bailey Xingxue's pupils contracted as he felt a bone-piercing chill. As a pinnacle swordsman, his instincts were very sharp, allowing him to react in an instant. His figure moved slightly to the side, and he retreated about half a meter. Pooh! In the next instant, the sound of flesh being torn apart could be heard. A bloody wound appeared on Bailey Xingxue's face. Damn it! Bailey Xingxue steadied his body. Feeling the blood on his face, he couldn't help but roar. At this moment, he felt the greatest killing intent of his life. Whoosh! At this moment, the sound of something piercing through the air resounded. Immediately after, a black silhouette appeared. Both of his claws stretched across the sky towards Bailey Xingxue. At that moment, Bailey Xingxue could clearly see what that thing looked like. It looked like a cat, but it had no eyes and a huge tail. Its body was as dark as night, and its aura was very strange, as if it had merged with the surrounding darkness. Die! Bailey Xingxue roared and stabbed out with his sword. A huge sword intent was released, causing the void to tremble. The surging sword intent turned into endless power and bombarded that thing. Bang! Following a dull thud, the thing was sent flying backward, while another bloody wound appeared on Bailey Xingxue's face. The wound was so deep that his bones could be seen. It was obvious that he had been scratched by the sharp claws. Although the thing was not huge, its body was extremely strong, as it was able to break through Bailey Xingxue's sword intent. Roar! 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 Bailey Xingxue frowned. However, at that instant, a series of ear-piercing screams could be heard in the dark space. Bailey Xingxue's eyes widened as he discovered that he was surrounded by black shadows. Crap! Bailey Xingxue's heart sank. Sword intent burst out from his body as a pair of wings appeared on his back. The phantom-like black cat was extremely difficult to deal with. Bailey Xingxue already felt threatened by just one of them, let alone a dozen of them at the same time. At that instant, there was only one thought in Bailey Xingxue's mind. Run! Phew! In the next instant, with a flap of the wings on his back, his figure flew toward the exit of the crack like an arrow being fired. However, the phantom-like figures were unwilling to let him go. They all charged toward him at an incredible speed like black lightning. Whoosh! 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 In the air, rays of black light shot toward Bailey Xingxue. They were extremely terrifying. Like a torrential rain, they sealed off a part of the void and enveloped him. Bailey Xingxue frowned his eyebrows as he activated the sword intent shield. Following this, a series of dull thuds could be heard. The sword intent shield had blocked most of the attacks for Bailey Xingxue. Bailey Xingxue ignored everything else and flew toward the sky with the wings on his back. At the same time, Nie Tian and the others stood in the sky and waited patiently. At that instant, Luo Ho's eyes flickered as he glanced at Nie Tian and said nervously, "Master Nie Tian, something's happening in the crack." Nie Tian's eyes glistened as his figure moved closer to the crack. Nie Tian. At that instant, a scream could be heard from the crack. Nie Tian frowned. Of course, he could tell that it was Bailey Xingxue's voice, which made him even more surprised. He had never thought that Bailey Xingxue, who had always been indifferent, would be so flustered. Then, a blood-red figure dashed out from the crack. It was Bailey Xingxue. Bailey Xingxue. Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he exclaimed. Bailey Xingxue was extremely powerful. How could he be so badly injured? What was inside the crack? Howl, howl, howl. The next moment, a series of ear-piercing cries could be heard from the crack. Figures that looked like black cats appeared and charged toward Bailey Xingxue. 9 limits of the starry sky, sun annihilation. Seeing this, Nie Tian's eyes darkened. Then, his sword intent surged and he struck out with his sword. A terrifying sword shadow appeared and bombarded the black cat. Bang, bang, bang. In the air, a series of dull thuds could be heard as the black cats were sent flying. Following this, an even more bizarre scene occurred. Howl, howl, howl. Runes appeared on the black bodies of the black cats in the air. Then, they suddenly burst into flames and let out miserable cries before turning into ashes in an instant. This scene caused Nie Tian's expression to change, and he let out a cry of surprise. It seemed that the seals on the black cats were triggered and they were killed by the seals. Chapter 32-38. The Sixth Soul Curse. 9 Lives Ghost Cat. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression changed slightly when he heard the Ghost Emperor's voice. It really is the 9 Lives Ghost Cat. Why would such an extinct creature appear here? The Ghost Emperor's voice sounded out once more, sounding even more shocked. Nie Tian frowned. He suddenly saw Bailey Xingxue's figure swaying in the air before falling down. He flew over and caught Bailey Xingxue in his arms. His aura is so weak. Nie Tian took a step forward and flew to a safe location. Sensing Bailey Xingxue's aura, he couldn't help but exclaim, his face darkening. At this moment, Bailey Xingxue's entire body was dripping with blood. Numerous bloody wounds appeared on his body, making him look like a bloody mess. It was obvious that these wounds were left by the 9 Lives Ghost Cat. With Bailey Xingxue's strength, these wounds should be able to heal very quickly. However, his wounds showed no signs of healing. Instead, they were bleeding profusely, dyeing his entire body red. Nie Tian took a deep breath and prepared to heal Bailey Xingxue's wounds with the power of the Earth Vein source. Wait! However, at this time, the Ghost Emperor hastily said, "He has been injured by the 9 Lives Ghost Cat. The power of the 6th Soul Ghost Curse has already seeped into his martial body. Healing his wounds now is equivalent to killing him." The 6th Soul Curse. Nie Tian was stunned. He had no idea what kind of power it was. The Ghost Emperor frowned and explained, "The 6th Soul Curse is the power of the 9 Lives Ghost Cat's bloodline. Once it seeps into a cultivator's martial body, it will rapidly weaken the cultivator's divine soul and yuan meridians." Those black cats were the 9 Lives Ghost Cats? Nie Tian asked with a frown. Yes. The Ghost Emperor nodded. He guessed Nie Tian's doubts and said, "The beasts in this world are divided into 3 categories according to their abilities: spirit beasts, divine beasts, and saint beasts. Generally speaking, the beasts in the planar world are all spirit beasts, the realms are mostly divine beasts, and the sacred worlds are mostly saint beasts. Spirit beasts, divine beasts, and sacred beasts also have their own ranks. Among the holy beasts, the strongest are rank 9 holy beasts. However, among the rank 9 divine beasts, there are some exceptions. Due to the fact that they have existed for a very long time, the bloodline power within their bodies has continued to accumulate. Gradually, they have surpassed ordinary rank 9 divine beasts, and are known as divine beasts that surpass rank 9. The 9 Lives Ghost Cat is one of the holy beasts that surpasses rank 9. Its bloodline power is the 6 Souls Ghost Curse." After hearing the Ghost Emperor's words, Nie Tian could not help but frown with a gloomy expression. He didn't expect that beasts also had bloodline power. Actually, it wasn't strange when he thought about it. Just like the fat cat's inherited memories, it was also a kind of bloodline power. What surprised him even more was that the seemingly weak 9 Lives Ghost Cat was actually a saint beast that surpassed the 9th level. But if the 9 lives ghost cat was a saint beast that surpassed the 9th tier, why was it so weak? A level 9 sacred beast should be comparable to a human at the peak of the sage realm. However, on the surface, the 9 lives ghost cat didn't seem very strong. In fact, it couldn't even compare to a rank 9 divine beast. The 9 lives ghost cat is a saint beast that surpassed the 9th level. In other words, it has the potential to become a divine beast that surpassed the 9th level. The Ghost Emperor knew what Nye Tian was thinking. He said, however, the extent to which a beast can grow is mainly determined by the environment it grows in. For example, human cultivators with the same aptitude and potential would achieve completely different martial Dao achievements if they grew up in a sacred world or a realmverse. The 9 lives ghost cat just now grew up in a realmverse. Of course, it wouldn't be very strong. Nye Tian nodded slightly as he understood the Ghost Emperor's words. When the 9 lives ghost cat grew up in a realmverse, it was limited by its environment. Its strength could only reach the peak of the divine realm at most. Take Nye Tian for example. If he were a sacred world cultivator, his current strength would definitely be at the sage realm. Ghost Emperor, what happened just now? Why did the 9 lives ghost cats suddenly burst into flames? Nye Tian became cold after a while and asked in a deep voice. The scene just now was extremely strange. The 9 lives ghost cats were covered in strange runes when Nye Tian swung his sword, and they spontaneously combusted to death. It was as if a human cultivator had spontaneously combusted to death. It's very likely that the 9 lives ghost cats were controlled by someone. The 9 lives ghost cats died because they lost control of the 6 souls ghost curse in their bodies. The Ghost Emperor frowned and wore a solemn expression. Nye Tian's face sank. He was extremely shocked. He didn't expect the 9 lives ghost cats to be controlled by someone. Just how strong was the person controlling the 9 lives ghost cats? Nye Tian, it's still a guess. You don't have to worry too much. Let's save this kid first, the Ghost Emperor said in a deep voice. Everything in the Tianxing mountain range was filled with a strange aura. The Ghost Emperor had a bad feeling about it. He didn't want to put too much pressure on Nye Tian, so he didn't tell him too much. Following this, Nye Tian inserted the energy of the stars into Bailey Xingshue's body to force out the power of the 6 souls ghost curse. The power of the 6 souls ghost curse was extremely terrifying. Luckily, Nye Tian possessed the energy of the stars, thus he was able to force the 6 souls ghost curse out. Otherwise, Bailey Xingxue would be in great danger. Half a day later, Nye Tian finally managed to force the 6 souls ghost curse out of Bailey Xingxue's body. Bailey Xingxue's life was no longer in danger, and the wounds on his body began to heal slowly. However, his injuries were too serious. He would need some time to fully recover. Thank you. Bailey Xingxue regained his senses. He knew that it was Nye Tian who had saved his life. He glanced at Nye Tian and expressed his gratitude. You've saved my life once, so we're even. Nye Tian nodded with a smile. A strange look flickered in Bailey Xingxue's eyes, but he didn't say anything. Following this, Nye Tian and the others didn't dare to approach the crack in the ground. They entered the forbidden land of Tianxing and found a remote valley to rest. 3 days later, Bailey Xingxue's condition improved a little. Nye Tian and the others stood up and prepared to leave the valley for the hinterland of the Tianxing mountain range. If the heaven and earth holy vein really existed, it would definitely be in the hinterland of the mountain range. After walking out of the valley, Nye Tian and the others headed for the hinterland of the Tianxing mountain range. Along the way, Nye Tian and the others quickly discovered that many cultivators had arrived at the Forbidden Land. Moreover, they were all heading in the same direction. The forbidden formation of the Tianxing Forbidden Land had already collapsed, so it wasn't strange for a large number of cultivators to enter. However, it was strange for so many people to be heading in the same direction. Brother, did something happen? Where are you all going? Luo Ho stopped a cultivator with a puzzled look on his face. Don't you know? Someone has discovered the heaven and earth holy vein. It's in the valley ahead. The man frowned and said impatiently. He then turned around and left. Chapter 32-39. Holy Meridians. Someone had actually discovered a holy meridian. This was something that Nye Tian had never expected. Rumor had it that only the most talented geniuses could find a holy meridian. Could it be that there were even more terrifying geniuses than Bailey Xingxue and Feng Wanhong in the Myriad Domain Guild? Nye Tian, Bailey Xingxue, and the rest had many questions in their hearts. However, since a holy meridian had appeared, it was a good thing. They could go and see for themselves what the legendary holy meridian looked like. Nye Tian and the rest followed the crowd and moved forward. Soon, they arrived at the entrance of a secluded canyon. The entrance to the canyon was not big, but it gave off a very eerie feeling. If not for the fact that there were so many martial artists here, most people would not have dared to enter alone. It really is the aura of a holy meridian. Before they entered the canyon, the Ghost Emperor's voice rang out. He was pleasantly surprised and very excited. Within the canyon, there was a very dense aura of a holy meridian. It was the aura of a holy meridian. At this moment, countless martial artists rushed into the canyon one after another. They all wanted to see the legendary holy meridian for themselves. Nye Tian was very excited, but he was not in a hurry. Since he was already here, there was no harm in waiting a little longer. After a while, when most people had entered, Nye Tian and the rest finally entered the canyon. The moment they entered the canyon, Nye Tian felt a mysterious aura rushing towards him. The impact was very strong, and in an instant, all the pores on his body opened up. Instantly, he felt a pleasing sense of joy. It was very mysterious and magical. Look! Just at this moment, Luo Ho seemed to have noticed something, and he cried out in surprise, revealing great excitement. Nye Tian and the rest focused their eyes and looked up into the sky. What they saw made their expressions change, and they froze on the spot. High up in the sky, a mysterious force surged, forming a huge vortex in the air. Layer by layer, it was like a flight of stairs, extremely mysterious. The huge vortex released a holy meridian, enveloping the entire area in holiness. When everyone saw this, they were shocked and dumbfounded. It was hard to imagine that there could be such a magical scene in the world. Everyone felt an indescribable joy in their hearts. After a long time, the Ghost Emperor's voice suddenly rang out, "The 9 Heaven Saint Meridians, this Heaven and Earth Saint Meridian is really going to open. 9th Heavenly Layer Saint Bloodline?" Nye Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard the Ghost Emperor's words. He glanced at the Saint Aura vortexes in the sky, and discovered that there were 9 of them, each representing a level of heaven. However, he didn't know what the 9th level of the Saint Bloodline meant. The 9 heavens of Saint Bloodline is the gate to the Heaven and Earth Saint Bloodline. Only by reaching the 9 heavens will the Heaven and Earth Saint Bloodline appear. The Ghost Emperor explained. "Is that the highest place?" Nye Tian squinted his eyes and looked at the whirlpool of Saint Aura at the highest level. However, he found it strange that the aura of the highest Saint Aura whirlpool was the weakest. "Nye Tian, you're mistaken." The Ghost Emperor chuckled and said, "The highest level is the 1st Heaven's Saint Bloodline, and the lowest level is the 9th Heaven's Saint Bloodline. The Heaven and Earth Saint Bloodline is located underground, and the 9 Heavens Saint Bloodline nurtured by the Heaven and Earth Saint Bloodline is more terrifying than the previous one. Only the most talented cultivators can step into the 9th Heavens Saint Bloodline. If no one steps into the 9th Heavens Saint Bloodline, it's impossible to open the Heaven and Earth Saint Bloodline. It's just the 9th Heavens Saint Bloodline. I should be fine." Nye Tian smiled, and his lips curled into a confident smile. He didn't know how many times he had seen this kind of talent testing thing. Almost every time, he could reach a level that ordinary people couldn't imagine. His martial Dao talent was definitely the best of the best. Nye Tian, it won't be enough for you to step into the ninth heaven's saint bloodline alone. However, the Ghost Emperor sighed and said, the opening of the heaven and earth saint bloodline requires the cooperation of many talented cultivators. It's impossible for you to open the heaven and earth saint bloodline alone. Nye Tian frowned and his expression stiffened. It seemed like the ninth heaven's saint bloodline was more complicated than he had imagined. Normally, the ninth heavens of the heaven and earth saint bloodline has to be activated by a talented cultivator. However, this heaven and earth saint bloodline is very strange. It seems to have automatically formed the ninth heavens saint bloodline. The Ghost Emperor frowned and said in confusion. He had seen heaven and earth saint bloodlines many times before, but he had never seen a heaven and earth saint bloodline that automatically formed the ninth heavens saint bloodline. He could vaguely feel that there was something strange about this heaven and earth saint bloodline. At this moment, there were tens of thousands of cultivators gathered at the ninth heavens saint bloodline. Everyone's eyes were burning with excitement, and they were obviously eager to give it a try. That whirlpool in the sky looks very mysterious. Let me give it a try. At this moment, someone finally couldn't hold it in any longer. With a loud roar, he leaped into the sky and dashed toward the ninth heavens. The crowd's eyes lit up as they looked over. In the next instant, an extremely strange scene took place. The cultivator approached the ninth heavens at an extremely fast speed. However, he suddenly came to a stop, and his body shuddered before it split open. Countless bloody holes appeared on his body, and in the blink of an eye, his entire body turned into a bloody mist and dissipated. The scene was extremely bloody. It was as if there was an invisible force in the air that directly strangled the cultivator to death. The shocking scene caused everyone's expression to freeze as they inhaled a mouthful of cold air. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. What exactly is going on? What kind of force exists outside of the ninth heavens saint bloodline? Nye Tian frowned with a solemn expression. That cultivator was too stupid. He treated the ninth heavens as the first heavens, and was forcefully strangled to death by the Saint Aura. If one wanted to step into the ninth heavens saint bloodline, they would have to start from the first heavens. After witnessing the tragedy of the cultivator, the crowd became cautious and did not dare to act recklessly. Feng Wanhong, it's been a while. At this time, a low and violent voice suddenly came from high up in the sky. Then, a sharp figure in green appeared and landed directly on the first layer of heaven. The sudden scene caused everyone's eyes to widen in astonishment. Who would have thought that someone would suddenly appear and directly step onto the highest Saint Aura whirlpool? He's Yuan Ji. In the next moment, someone recognized the identity of the figure in green and exclaimed in shock. Yuan Ji. Ranked third among the 9 princes, Yuan Ji. Following that, the crowd began to exclaim as they recognized the figure. The figure in green that suddenly appeared was Yuan Ji, ranked third among the 9 princes. Chapter 3240. A clash of geniuses. Yuan Ji had suddenly arrived and forcefully stepped onto the first-level saint bloodline. The sharpness of his body was extremely obvious, causing everyone to feel the sharpness of his blade. Everyone's eyes were filled with shock as they locked onto Yuan Ji with fervent and excited expressions. Yuan Ji was very famous in the Myriad Domain Association. He bore many titles. The third of the 9 great names, the number 1 martial genius of the Tianqing family, the Yuan family's most talented martial artist in millions of years, the Yuan family's most talented martial artist, and so on. There was a rumor regarding Yuan Ji. An ancestral bloodline had appeared in his body, and the power of his bloodline had already surpassed that of the Yuan family's ancestor. However, this was only a rumor. As for how strong Yuan Ji's bloodline was, no one knew. At this moment, Yuan Ji had arrived in a domineering manner. His eyes were locked onto Feng Wanhong with a cold and murderous intent, causing the atmosphere to instantly become tense. Everyone in the Myriad Domain Guild knew that among the 5 great Tianqing families, the Feng family and the Yuan family weren't on good terms. A long time ago, Yuan Ji had challenged Feng Wanhong but failed. Hence, his ranking among the 9 great young masters was below Feng Wanhong. However, at that time, Yuan Ji was still very young. He was below 10,000 years old. Later on, Yuan Ji went into seclusion to raise his strength. However, when he came out, he discovered that Feng Wanhong had gone into seclusion. In order to challenge Feng Wanhong again, Yuan Ji had even caused a huge commotion in the Feng family that year. This matter had even alarmed the Myriad Domain Guild's president. In the end, the Yuan family and the Feng family's ancestor had personally come out to settle the matter. What infuriated Yuan Ji the most was that Feng Wanhong had gone into seclusion for 10,000 years. During this time, he had been suppressed by Feng Wanhong. The resentment in his heart had accumulated more and more. Because of Feng Wanhong's seclusion, he didn't even have the chance to challenge Bailey Xingxue. This was because the 9 great young masters had to be ranked from weakest to strongest. One couldn't challenge someone above their rank. Hence, one could imagine the anger and murderous intent in Yuan Ji's heart when he saw Feng Wanhong. Yuan Ji. Feng Wanhong stood in the air and looked at the familiar face in the sky. He couldn't help laughing and faintly said, "It has been a long time since we last met, but your strength has increased quite a bit." "Feng Wanhong, you coward!" Yuan Ji's eyes flickered as he fiercely stomped on the ground, leaping high into the air from the first layer of the Saint Vein. His aura erupted in a frenzy as a violent force surged around him like a tsunami. He shouted, "Enough nonsense, come and fight me!" A battle! Yuan Ji's words caused everyone's eyes to shudder with astonishment. Yuan Ji was indeed arrogant enough to challenge Feng Wanhong in front of so many people. Feng Wanhong's eyes narrowed as his expression stiffened. Yuan Ji's arrogance had exceeded his expectations. He wasn't afraid of fighting Yuan Ji, but in front of so many people, especially when the Heaven and Earth Saint Vein had appeared, it was not the right time for the two of them to fight. "You've been hiding for 10,000 years, Feng Wanhong," Yuan Ji shouted. "You've finally come out after hiding for 10,000 years. Are you addicted to being a coward? Do you not dare to fight me, Yuan Ji? Yuan Ji, you're too arrogant." Feng Wanhong's eyes darkened, and his face instantly became cold. "Ha ha ha ha." Yuan Ji became even more arrogant when he sensed Feng Wanhong's anger. "Feng Wanhong, I, Yuan Ji, am being too arrogant today. If you don't dare to fight me, then surrender. Since we're both from the Tianqing clan, I'll spare your life if you kneel down and beg for mercy." Ha! In the end, Yuan Ji burst out laughing, his entire body emitting an insufferably arrogant aura. The crowd stared at Yuan Ji with unpleasant expressions, as if Yuan Ji was being too arrogant. Feng Wanhong is ranked second among the 9 princes. Yuan Ji is being too arrogant. Yuan Ji has indeed crossed the line. I don't think his strength is stronger than Master Feng Wanhong's. When Master Feng Wanhong accepts the challenge, the battle between the two will be very interesting. A battle between 2 geniuses will definitely be exciting. Saying this, the crowd subconsciously shifted their gaze toward Feng Wanhong. "Yuan Ji, you're too arrogant." At the same time, Feng Wanhong let out a thunderous roar and stomped the ground. His figure soared into the sky like a towering mountain, facing Yuan Ji in an imposing manner. Despite his good temper, it was impossible for him to tolerate Yuan Ji's arrogant provocation. If Yuan Ji wanted to fight, then so be it. "Feng Wanhong, you coward, are you finally willing to step forward?" Yuan Ji stared at Feng Wanhong and let out a cold smile. "I, Yuan Ji, shall cripple you in front of everyone today." After saying this, the aura surrounding his body skyrocketed once again, as a terrifying force surged and wreaked havoc in the sky, as if it was going to devour the heavens and earth. Such a ferocious force. Nie Tian frowned as he stared at Yuan Ji and murmured in his heart, Yuan-Ji's flesh was extremely terrifying, and he was definitely one of the best among all the cultivators he had met so far. This undoubtedly indicated that Yuan-Ji possessed an extremely powerful bloodline force in his body. Feng Wanhong, I'm going to prove that I, Yuan-Ji, am stronger than you. Yuan-Ji let out a thunderous roar as he took a step forward and unleashed a ferocious force in Feng Wanhong's direction. Is that so? Feng Wanhong let out a hollow laugh as he lashed out with his palm, causing a giant ice dragon to appear in the sky like a ferocious beast. Rumble! Two terrifying forces collided with one another, causing the heavens and earth to shake violently. The wind and clouds turned gloomy as a destructive force spread across the sky. Huh! At that instant, a ferocious aura struck down, causing Feng Wanhong to let out a cry of surprise. His figure was sent flying 1,000 meters away. Even though he managed to stabilize his footing, he still looked extremely miserable. The second strongest among the 9 childs, is this all you've got? Yuan-Ji laughed madly again and again. His aura continued to soar. His muscles bulged and his veins popped out. His physical strength was being pushed to the limit. Crap! Nie Tian's eyes darkened as he realized that the situation was not looking good. Yuan-Ji's martial body was too strong. On the other hand, Feng Wanhong had suffered serious injuries before. Even though he had recovered a little, he had yet to fully recover. His strength was limited and it was impossible for him to face Yuan-Ji head-on. I didn't expect Yuan-Ji's limitless heavenly seal bloodline to be so powerful. Feng Wanhong is in danger. Bailey Xingxue, who was standing next to Nie Tian, said worriedly for Feng Wanhong. Feng Wanhong, after today's battle, everyone will understand who is stronger and who is weaker between the two of us. At that moment, Yuan-Ji let out a thunderous roar as he unleashed his physical strength. His destructive aura seemed to be able to cover everything. Chapter 3241. Boundless Heavenly Seal. The Boundless Heavenly Seal was the bloodline power of the Yuan clan, an extremely powerful seal. Once the Boundless Heavenly Seal was unleashed, the strength of a cultivator's martial physique would increase by several folds. Almost every cultivator of the Tianxing clan had a Boundless Heavenly Seal in their body, but the number of Boundless Heavenly Seals in each person's body varied. Cultivators with weaker bloodlines would only have a few Boundless Heavenly Seals in their bodies, while those with stronger bloodlines would have hundreds or even thousands of Boundless Heavenly Seals. Yuan-Ji, as the strongest expert of the Yuan clan, had a total of 9,000 Boundless Heavenly Seals in his body, almost reaching the limit of his bloodline power. What was more terrifying was that 300 of Yuan-Ji's 9,000 Boundless Heavenly Seals had been awakened. 300 Boundless Heavenly Seals were unleashed at the same time, unleashing a terrifying force that pushed Yuan-Ji's martial physique to its limits, allowing him to possess such terrifying physical strength. Boom boom boom! Yuan-Ji stood high up in the sky, unleashing a terrifying force from his body like a raging wave crashing into the void. This guy's martial physique has surpassed the limit of a peak pseudo-sacred realm expert. Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he sensed the aura of Yuan-Ji's body. He did not expect Yuan-Ji's martial physique to be this terrifying. In this way, Feng Wanhong was in danger. This guy's martial physique is indeed terrifying. He's like a ferocious beast right now. The Ghost Emperor's voice could be heard as he exclaimed. Yuan-Ji's current martial physique was something that even Nie Tian could not contend against. Unless Nie Tian activated his celestial physique, he would not be able to contend against Yuan-Ji in terms of martial physique alone. Feng Wanhong, die for me! Yuan-Ji roared crazily at this moment. His eyes were bloodshot, and his killing intent was extremely dense and frightening. Not only did he want to defeat Feng Wanhong, but he also wanted to kill him. The crowd could feel Yuan-Ji's murderous intent, causing their eyes to tremble as they discussed among themselves. Yuan-Ji is too terrifying. Feng Wanhong is not his match. Yuan-ji is indeed the strongest bloodline warrior of the Yuan family. Such a powerful bloodline power is unimaginable. Yuan-ji is too crazy. From the looks of it, he really wants to kill Feng Wanhong. As the voices fell, the gazes of the crowd became even more fervent and excited. They were looking forward to seeing Yuan-ji kill Feng Wanhong. If that really happened, the Yuan clan and the Feng clan would probably fall out with each other. Damn it! Feng Wanhong looked at Yuan-ji with an ugly expression. Yuan-ji's strength had indeed exceeded his expectations. Yuan-ji's madness also surprised him. Yuan-ji's killing intent was definitely not a pretense. He really wanted to kill him. Feng Wanhong die. High up in the sky, Yuan-ji's figure moved in an instant. He struck out with his palm and directly attacked Feng Wanhong. Die! 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 Yuan-ji's voice reverberated in the void, showing how berserk he was at the moment. Bang! Suddenly, a terrifying and violent force appeared in the air, like an erupting volcano. It was incomparably terrifying, rolling and roaring as it pressed down on Feng Wanhong. Screw it! Feng Wanhong's eyes flickered as he felt the incoming pressure. He let out a roar in his heart as his body surged with blood qi. In order to resist Yuan-ji's attack, he had to ignite his own blood qi. Icy Universe Art, Roar of 10,000 Dragons. Feng Wanhong's lips twitched as a majestic icy force burst out from his body. Suddenly, the space within 10,000 meters around him was filled with an icy aura. It was as if his entire body had turned into a sea of ice. Roar, roar, roar. Following which, within the sea of ice, numerous gigantic ice dragons appeared. Instantly, tens of thousands of dragons danced in the air. The power of ice in the air was extremely sharp. Many people who were tens of thousands of meters away could feel the bone-piercing chill. These two people are so strong. The eyes of the crowd trembled as they exclaimed in their hearts. Bang, bang, bang. Following this, the two terrifying forces collided with one another, causing the heavens and earth to tremble and the wind to change color. The two terrifying forces were in a stalemate for an instant, as neither was able to destroy the other. Yuan-ji stood in the sky with his bloodshot eyes filled with murderous intent as he said in a cold tone, Feng Wanhong, you're stronger than I've imagined, but this battle ends here. As soon as he finished his sentence, his aura surged wildly. Bang, bang, bang. In the next instant, a series of Wuji heavenly seals unleashed a terrifying force, resulting in a destructive aura. Countless ice dragons shattered into pieces under the impact of the terrifying force, turning into water vapor and disappearing into the air. Feng Wanhong instantly felt that something was amiss. His eyes flickered as he panicked and began to back away. However, as soon as he backed away, the pressure from the rift became even stronger and pressed down on him. At that instant, Feng Wanhong's expression darkened. His eyes were filled with utter despair. At this moment, what he felt was the most realistic aura of death. He no longer had the strength to resist. The power of the Wuji heavenly seal was too strong. If Feng Wanhong was at his peak condition, he might have a chance to fight against Yuan-ji. But now, not only would he not have a chance, but he would also die. At this moment, the gazes of the crowd suddenly trembled with fervent excitement. They were actually looking forward to the moment Feng Wanhong was killed. A rare occurrence took place at the moment of life and death. Bang! A wave of sword will appeared in the void and enveloped Feng Wanhong, forming a sword will shield around his body. That layer of sword-intense shield looked very unremarkable, but it was very strange. It actually helped Feng Wanhong block all of the impact. Feng Wanhong's figure was knocked a few thousand meters away. After stabilizing himself, his face was filled with a blank expression. He never thought that he would still be alive. It felt like a dream. The sudden scene caused everyone's eyes to shudder, as they glanced at the figure in the rift on the other side. It was a white-robed swordsman. Bailey Shengxue. The crowd was dumbfounded as they yelled out the name of the white-robed swordsman. The person who made the move was none other than the number 1 figure among the 9 princes, Bailey Xingxue. Bailey Xingxue stood in the wind, his white robe fluttering in the wind. His entire body was surging with a faint sword intent, and his eyes were as calm as a cold pond. Bailey Xingxue. Yuan Ji stood in the air, his eyes glinting fiercely as he stared at Bailey Xingxue and said coldly, "I didn't look for you, but you came looking for me. Since I've defeated Feng Wanhong, the next person to be defeated will be you." The cold voice caused everyone's eyes to tremble and their expressions to freeze. Chapter 3242. Chapter 3237. Not qualified. Yuan Ji stood coldly in the sky, his body emitting a terrifying aura. His eyes were locked onto Bailey Xingxue with a ferocious look. Bailey Xingxue had saved Feng Wanhong, which infuriated him, thus he continued to challenge Bailey Xingxue. Bailey Xingxue stood on the spot with a cold expression. His face was unconcealable pale. He was extremely weak to begin with. He had forcefully saved Feng Wanhong's life. Currently, his aura was unstable, thus it was impossible for him to fight against Yuan Ji. Yuan Ji must have realized this, which was why he had challenged Bailey Xingxue to a duel. The crowd's eyes glistened before they glanced at Bailey Xingxue, waiting for his response. Yuan Ji had defeated Feng Wanhong in a dominating manner, making him the second strongest among the 9 scions. If he continued to challenge Bailey Xingxue, it would surely be an exciting match. However, Bailey Xingxue wore a dark expression and remained silent for a long time. His injuries were too severe. The previous slash had almost depleted all of his remaining strength. If he were to challenge Yuan Ji, he would only be humiliating himself. "Bailey Xingxue, you're the strongest, are you scared now?" Yuan Ji let out a cold laugh and provoked Bailey Xingxue after seeing him remaining silent. Bailey Xingxue's expression darkened as he took a step forward and was about to speak. "Yuan Ji, if you want to fight, I'll fight you." However, at that instant, a deep voice could be heard as a silver-haired figure appeared in midair, staring at Yuan Ji calmly. Bailey Xingxue turned around and frowned when he saw Nie Tian's figure. He knew that Nie Tian was no ordinary cultivator, but Yuan Ji's strength was not to be underestimated. After all, Nie Tian's cultivation was only at the 5th grade pseudo-sacred realm, which was too weak compared to Yuan Ji. Yuan Ji frowned as he glanced at Nie Tianling and said with a laugh, "A mere 5th grade pseudo-sacred realm trash dares to act so arrogantly? Do I look like a weakling to you? Piss off." With that, Yuan Ji let out a roar and unleashed his aura. He casually waved his hand, and a wave of energy surged toward Nie Tian. Everyone's eyes trembled. Such a terrifying force was enough to instantly kill a pseudo-sage 5th stage expert. Boom! The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled up into a faint smile. With a calm expression, not the slightest bit of fear could be seen on his face. With a shake of his body, a terrifying sword aura burst forth from within him, and forcibly broke free from Yuan Ji's pressure. He stood high up in the sky, not moving an inch. This strange scene caused everyone to exclaim in surprise. They all looked at Nie Tian with strange gazes. The aura that Yuan Ji had released earlier was enough to instantly kill a pseudo-saint 5th order expert. On the other hand, Nie Tian's strength just so happened to be at pseudo-sage tier 5. Yet why was he still alive? In fact, he was able to remain as still as a bell. This was too strange. Interesting. Yuan Ji stared at Nie Tian and was startled at first. Then, his eyes darkened and his lips curled up in a cold tone. He did not expect that this inconspicuous silver-haired cultivator in front of him would be so strong. However, it was obvious that he did not think highly of Nie Tian. Nie Tian's strength was only relative to cultivators of the same level. However, Yuan Ji was a pseudo-sage tier expert. Why would he look down on a pseudo-sage tier cultivator? "Now, can I be your opponent?" Nie Tian smiled and looked at Yuan Ji calmly. "You want to be my opponent?" You're not qualified. Yuan-ji's eyes darkened as he let out a cold growl. He then took a step forward and slammed his palm down. Instantly, an endless amount of energy transformed into a giant palm that crushed down on Nie Tian like a collapsing mountain. Such power! Everyone's eyes widened in shock. This time, the power that Yuan-ji had used was obviously stronger than before. Judging from the aura, even a pseudo-sage tier cultivator would have a hard time resisting such a violent attack. Nie Tian stood on the spot and his lips twitched as he mumbled, 12 Sky Attacking Sword Formation, activate. Boom, boom, boom. As soon as he finished speaking, 12 terrifying sword shadows appeared like giants that could support the heavens and the earth, oppressing the void. Boom, boom, boom. Following this, the terrifying palm landed on the 12 Sky Attacking Sword Formation, but it was once again blocked by the sword formation. Nie Tian stood there with his arms behind his back, and didn't move an inch. The strange scene caused everyone's eyes to tremble, and they simultaneously gasped in shock. A 5th-rank pseudo-sage cultivator had blocked Yuan-ji's attack. Was this really not an illusion? How is this possible? Yuan-ji's eyes darkened as he let out a roar. His aura surged, and he was obviously infuriated. He had not expected Nie Tian's strength to be this strong. The previous 2 attacks were just probing attack. He had not used his full strength. However, it was obvious that Nie Tian had not used his full strength since he was so calm. It was obvious that Nie Tian's body was hiding an even more terrifying power. How about now? Nie Tian's lips curled upward as he asked calmly with a smile. His voice wasn't loud, and there wasn't the slightest bit of pressure in it. However, it was extremely provocative. Brat, you've infuriated me. Yuan-ji's face darkened. His eyes were filled with a strong murderous intent. At this moment, he still did not consider Nie Tian a worthy opponent. However, he really wanted to kill Nie Tian, as Nie Tian had embarrassed him in front of the crowd. You're angry? Nie Tian's lips twitched when he sensed Yuan-ji's murderous intent. The starlight heavenly slash appeared in his hand as he said in a cold tone, "Let's fight." He did not want to waste any more time. He was ready to fight Yuan-ji right away. 5th grade pseudo-sacred realm ant, I would like to see how you're going to fight me. Yuan-ji let out a furious roar. His aura was as powerful as the ocean. Bailey Xingxue retreated to the side and looked at Nie Tian with a gloomy expression, unable to conceal the worry on his face. The battle prowess Nie Tian had displayed just now was indeed impressive. However, it was far from enough to contend against Yuan-ji. The crowd glanced at Nie Tian with disdainful looks. Even though Nie Tian's strength had exceeded their expectations, they still thought that Nie Tian was an idiot. Which normal pseudo-sacred realm martial artist would dare to challenge a pseudo-sacred realm martial artist with a monstrous pseudo-sacred realm martial artist? Nie Tian, on the other hand, stood in the air with a calm expression. In his opinion, Yuan-ji's strength was not much stronger than the Grimace cultivator's. If he could kill the Grimace cultivator, he could kill Yuan-ji as well. Prepare to die, ant, roared Yuan-ji. He took a step forward, and his energy skyrocketed to a terrifying level. Stop! But at this moment, in the air, a low voice sounded out. It was like rolling thunder and extremely terrifying. Everywhere it passed, it actually condensed into a wave of energy in the air. It was extremely terrifying. Chapter 3243. The President arrived in person. A figure descended from the sky. The moment his figure landed, the surrounding void sank. It was as if it was being suppressed by an invisible and powerful force, and it was about to be torn apart. The figure was a middle-aged man of medium build. He was expressionless and intimidating. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked at the man. He could feel that the middle-aged man's aura was even stronger than Bailey Xingxue's. However, compared to Bailey Xingxue, the middle-aged man's aura was less sharp. Mr. President, The arrival of the middle-aged man immediately attracted everyone's attention. After a while, someone recognized him and exclaimed. This middle-aged man was none other than the strongest person in the 10,000 Domains Guild, the president of the 10,000 Domains Guild, Jingju. In the next moment, everyone came to their senses. Their faces darkened and the entire place fell silent. Even someone as arrogant as Yuan Ji could not help but bow, not daring to speak. Jingju's figure flickered and appeared in front of the crowd at a low altitude. Following that, his gaze swept across everyone, and everyone felt a strong pressure emanating from him. That's enough. After a long time, Jingju finally opened his mouth and uttered these words coldly. Everyone's faces were solemn. No one dared to speak. Then, Jingju's gaze locked onto the ninth heaven saint bloodline. His expression slowly became complicated. No one knew what he was thinking. Nie Tian looked at Jingju. He was very curious about this president. Jingju gave him a very strange feeling. It was as if the latter was wrapped in a layer of mystery, hiding a huge secret. After a long silence, Jingju spoke again. Everyone, get ready. Next is the time for you to challenge the ninth heaven saint bloodline. When that time comes, it will be clear whether you are a dragon or a worm. Everyone's eyes flickered. There was not much joy on their faces. Instead, they were very worried. The scene of the cultivator who stepped into the ninth heaven saint bloodline was killed was still fresh in their minds. The ninth level of the saint bloodline might seem decent, but who knew how much killing intent there was in it? Then, Jingju did not speak anymore. He closed his eyes and stood there, as if waiting for something. He was here for the heaven and earth saint veins. Previously, he had been looking forward to the opening of the heaven and earth saint pulse. But not too long ago, the people of the myriad ghosts confluence suddenly appeared. He hadn't expected the myriad ghosts to come to the Tianxing realm when the heaven and earth saint veins were opening. Up until now, the progenitor still did not know the real purpose of all spirits together coming here. However, he had a bad feeling in his heart. It was likely that the people of all spirits together were here not only for the heaven and earth saint vein, but also for another purpose. Is the guild leader waiting for someone? Everyone looked at the person who had just appeared, confused. Half a day later, Yi Zichen was stunned. In the distant void, more than 10 figures appeared. They were extremely fast and arrived in the blink of an eye. Nie Tian could not help but frown as he looked at the dozen figures. His expression was somewhat ugly. The dozen or so figures were actually all grimacing cultivators. However, the person leading them wore a grimacing mask that was different from the others. It seemed to be just a layer of ghost skin. These people are actually the people of the myriad ghosts confluence, Nie Tian said to himself as his eyes flickered. It seemed like the guild leader of the Myriad Domain Guild knew the people of the Myriad Ghosts Confluence. When the progenitor saw the people of the Myriad Ghosts Confluence, his eyes flashed with a similar light. He immediately walked over and said to the leading grimacing cultivator, "Ghost Venerate. Progenitor, is it about time?" The Ghost Venerate's eyes were cold as he called the progenitor's name. "Yes." The progenitor nodded and said, "We can start at any time." "Very good." The Ghost Venerate nodded and swept his gaze across the crowd. Everyone immediately felt a bone-piercing chill. At this moment, the Ghost Venerate's gaze locked onto two people, Nie Tian and Bailey Xingshu. Nie Tian's heart sank. He thought to himself, "This Ghost Venerate, could it be that he already knows that I killed the people of the Myriad Ghosts Confluence? Go and take a look. Is it the two of them?" The Ghost Venerate looked at the grimacing cultivator behind him and said indifferently, "Yes." The grimacing cultivator responded. His figure moved and approached Nie Tian and Bailey Xingshu. A strange light flickered in his eyes. After sensing for a long time, he turned to the Ghost Venerate and said, "Lord Ghost Venerate, it is the two of them who killed the 6 ghost ones." When Nie Tian and Bailey Xingshu heard the grimacing cultivator's words, their expressions sank. It seemed like these people, who were known as Ghost Ones, had a very special method of transmitting information to each other. Unexpectedly, this ghost venerate was able to tell that Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue had killed 6 Ghost Ones. When the other Ghost Ones knew that Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue had killed 6 Ghost Ones, they were all incomparably furious. They looked at Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue with intense killing intent. The people of the Myriad Domain Association were puzzled. They did not know who this ghost venerate was. They also did not know who the Ghost Ones that Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue were. However, the ghost venerate looked at Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue with trembling eyes and an expression of disbelief. His eyes were filled with astonishment as he looked at Nie Tian. He knew very well how powerful the ghost venerate of the Myriad Ghost Stream was. Even he did not dare to underestimate it. Bailey Xingxue was the strongest of the 9 young masters. It was normal for him to be able to kill a ghost venerate. However, Nie Tian only had the strength of a rank 5 pseudosage. How could he kill a ghost venerate? It was precisely because of this that the ghost venerate was shocked by Nie Tian. "Lord Ghost Venerate, let me take care of these 2 ants." At this moment, a ghost venerate stood up. His aura surged and a dark aura immediately spread in the void. "Stand down." However, the ghost venerate waved his hand and dismissed the ghost venerate. Following that, the ghost venerate moved like a ghost and arrived at a place 1,000 meters away from Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue. To a pseudosage expert, a distance of 1,000 meters was actually very dangerous. Nie Tian looked at the ghost venerate and his eyes narrowed slightly. He could not help but feel nervous. He could not sense the ghost venerate's strength. It was very strange. There are actually such outstanding martial artists in this realm. This venerate is really amazed. The ghost venerate stared at Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue for a long time, not concealing the shock in his heart. Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue had gloomy expressions and did not speak. Chapter 3244. Bet Your Life. After the ghost venerable finished speaking, his eyes shifted between Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue, looking very expectant. When everyone heard the words of the ghost lords, their eyes trembled violently, and they were shocked. No one would have thought that the ghost venerables and ghost ones were actually martial artists from the holy world. What was even more unexpected was that the Ghost Lord actually invited Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue to join the 10,000 Ghosts stream in front of everyone. The 10,000 Ghosts United Flow was a force in the holy world. Joining it was equivalent to entering the holy world. It was something that countless cultivators dreamed of. The other ghost immortals were taken aback, and their eyes were filled with doubt. Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue had killed 6 ghost practitioners, but the ghost venerable did not kill them. Instead, he invited them to join the 10,000 ghosts flow together. This was really unexpected. The person who sensed it was also very surprised. Not interested. However, not long after the ghost venerate finished speaking, Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue's voices rang out at the same time. They had actually rejected the ghost venerate. Huh! The ghost lord's eyes narrowed, and his pupils shrank slightly. He even suspected that he had heard it wrong. He couldn't believe that Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue had rejected his invitation. The reactions of the others were even more exaggerated. First, they were stunned. Then, they looked at Nie Tian and Li Yundong in a daze. Their expressions seemed to be saying, "Are you too crazy?" Indeed, in the eyes of others, Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue's response was crazy. Joining the myriad ghosts flowing together and entering the holy realm was the dream of many. Now, such a great opportunity was right in front of them, but Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue had actually rejected it. Only a fool or a madman would do such a thing. Have you really thought it through? Then, the Ghost King's gaze slightly froze and he said in a deep voice, "You will have to pay the price for rejecting me." "I have." Nie Tian smiled faintly, his face calm. "Yes." Bailey Xingxue nodded with a cold expression. Neither of them had any interest in joining the 10,000 ghosts flowing together. Seeing Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue, the man's eyes flickered, and he heaved a long sigh of relief. He was really worried that Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue would agree to the Spirit Lord's proposal. The Ghost Venerable's gaze darkened, cold and gloomy, even surging with killing intent. But in the next moment, he returned to normal. He laughed and said, "This is the first time I've seen a cultivator in the realm with such backbone like you two. It seems this lord has always underestimated the realm martial practitioners." "Thank you for your compliment, Spirit Lord." Nie Tian smiled faintly. His expression was so calm that it made people's hair stand on end. Right at this moment, Yuan Ji suddenly took a step forward, bowed deeply, and asked respectfully, "Lord Ghost Lord, may I join the myriad ghosts stream together?" "You?" "Humph." The Ghost Venerable turned around and glanced at Yuan Ji. He shook his head and sneered, his eyes filled with contempt. Yuan Ji's face stiffened, as ugly as it could be. Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue rejected the Ghost Venerable's invitation, but he, Yuan Ji, took the initiative to propose to join the myriad ghosts stream together, but was rejected by the Ghost Venerable. This undoubtedly showed that, in the Ghost Venerable's eyes, the gap between him and Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue was too big. The crowd looked at Yuan Ji. Many people covered their mouths, almost bursting into laughter. "Kid, do you see the 9th heaven of the Saint bloodline? If you can set foot on the 9th heaven, this Lord will let you join the myriad ghosts stream together." At this moment, the Ghost Venerable suddenly looked at Yuan Ji and said with a strange smile, "Okay." Yuan Ji looked at the 9th heaven of the Saint bloodline. His eyes instantly became hot, and he nodded heavily. "Don't let this lord down." The Ghost Venerable smiled faintly, then his figure moved and directly left. Yuan Ji will definitely not let Lord Ghost Venerable down. Yuan Ji bowed and promised, almost kneeling down. However, at this moment, the Ghost Venerable's figure had already arrived beside the person who sensed it, standing side by side with the latter. Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue looked at each other, not saying a word. The Ghost Venerable's eyes were cold as he said in a deep voice, "You may begin, Venerable." The Ghost Venerable nodded his head, slightly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and said in a loud voice, "Everyone, you may now begin to challenge the 9th heaven of the Saint bloodline. Let me remind you, the highest level of the whirlpool of Saint Aura is the 1st heaven of the Saint bloodline, and the lowest one is the 9th heaven of the Saint bloodline. After you set foot on the 9th heaven of the Saint bloodline, do not force yourself, or you will be suppressed to death by the power of the Saint Aura." As soon as the Ghost Venerable finished his words, he waved his hand, indicating that everyone could begin the challenge. Everyone's eyes were burning with excitement. Only now did they realize that the highest level of the whirlpool of Saint Aura was the 1st heaven. No wonder the previous cultivator was directly suppressed to death by the power of the Saint Aura. It turned out that he had directly challenged the 9th heaven of the Saint bloodline. Following that, without any hesitation, the crowd moved one after another, flocking towards the 1st heaven. Most of the people steadily landed on the 1st heaven. Only a small number of people felt a great pressure, and did not dare to set foot on it. The so-called 9th heaven of the Saint bloodline was actually layers of whirlpools of Saint Aura. However, the area of these whirlpools was huge, with a radius of tens of thousands of meters, enough to accommodate hundreds of thousands of cultivators at the same time. The 9th heaven of the Saint bloodline is indeed mysterious. I feel like I'm about to make a breakthrough here. Isn't that so? The energy in the surroundings is all Saint energy. If I can absorb this Saint energy, I wonder if I can become a saint. As the crowd stood on the 1st heaven, many of them were already looking forward to it, and their eyes were filled with anticipation. In the 9th heaven of the Saint bloodline, the gravity had already disappeared, and everyone felt as if they were in water. Following that, some people began to head towards the second heaven. However, the number of cultivators who could enter the second heaven from the first heaven was extremely few, not even a quarter of them. Is this the strength of a realm cultivator? There are so few people who can step into the second heaven. They are indeed a bunch of ants. Right at this moment, a ghost expert took a step forward and spoke in a cold tone, with an incomparably arrogant look on his face. Nie Tian glanced at the ghost expert, and the corner of his mouth twitched, but he did not say a word. This small movement of his was perfectly captured by the ghost expert, and the latter's figure moved and directly appeared in front of Nie Tian. Nie Tian furrowed his brows, and the corner of his mouth twitched as he said, "What do you want? Brat, you seem to be very arrogant. Why don't we make a bet and see who among us can enter the ninth heaven?" The ghost expert's eyes were surging with a cold light, and he said with an incomparably cold smile, "What bet?" Nie Tian faintly smiled, and the corner of his mouth pulled into a strange arc, "Bet with your life." The ghost expert's eyes suddenly turned cold, and he said coldly, "If I win, I'll take your life." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, but there wasn't much change in his expression. He said indifferently, "What if I win? If you win, I die." The ghost expert's eyes were cold, and his eyes were filled with contempt. In his opinion, it was impossible for Nie Tian to win. There had never been a realm cultivator who could step into the ninth heaven of the Saint bloodline. "If I win, I don't want your life." But at this moment, Nie Tian smiled faintly, and he pointed at the ghost expert and said, "I want you to take off your mask." Chapter 32:45. Who do you think you are? The corner of Nie Tian's lips curled into a cold smile as he looked at the specter in front of him. He was willing to bet his life with the specter, but if he won, he wouldn't take the specter's life, but the specter's mask. The specter's eyes narrowed when he heard Nie Tian's words. He panicked and even felt fear. It was as if the mask on his face was more important than his life. "There's indeed something strange about this mask," Nie Tian said in his heart as he narrowed his eyes slightly. The first time he saw the specter, he had noticed a strange aura within the mask. It seemed to be some kind of sealing power. The specter's panicked reaction meant that there was indeed something wrong with the mask. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he looked at the specter with a cold and provocative gaze. "Are you afraid? Afraid?" The specter's eyes trembled as he let out a strange cry. "I'm a rank 9 pseudo-sacred expert from the sacred world. Why would I be afraid of an ant from a domain like you? What a joke. Since you're not afraid, then it's settled. If I win, I'll personally tear off your mask." Nie Tian smiled faintly as a strange light flickered in his eyes. The specter's eyes trembled with fear, but he regained his composure in the next moment. He looked at Nie Tian cold and said, "Ant, I'd like to see how you're going to beat me." After saying that, his figure moved and his aura surged wildly. He was like a bolt of lightning as he charged towards the ninth heaven of the Saint bloodline. Wherever his figure passed, the surrounding crowd was directly pushed aside. Some of the weaker cultivators were even injured by the impact of his aura and vomited blood. Bang! In the next moment, the specter stepped onto the first heaven of the Saint bloodline. His aura surged wildly as he pushed everyone aside. He was extremely arrogant. The cultivators from the Myriad Domains Guild were enraged when they saw this, but they didn't dare to show it. They could only mutter under their breaths. "This person is so overbearing. He actually pushed us aside. Isn't he just relying on his strength? What's so great about that? If he wasn't born in the sacred world, how could he be so strong?" The crowd discussed among themselves and looked at the ghost realm expert with resentment in their eyes. What's there to be arrogant about? If I were in the holy world, my strength would have reached the saint realm long ago. He's just a rank 9 pseudo-saint. His talent is trash. A warrior was very dissatisfied and said angrily, "What did you say?" The ghost immortal roared as he spun around and glared at that cultivator. A murderous intent flashed in his eyes. No, nothing. That cultivator was instantly enveloped by a powerful killing intent. He was so frightened that his face stiffened. His teeth chattered violently, and he couldn't even speak properly. You dare call me trash? You're courting death. The eyes of the ghost adept sank, and a cold light flashed in them. He took a step forward and slapped out with his palm, aiming straight for the throat of that cultivator. In the blink of an eye, the martial artist was dead. His eyes were lifeless and his face was pale. He was scared silly. Bang! However, at this moment, a sword shadow fell from the sky and directly shattered the absolute kill palm shadow. Following that, a figure descended from the sky with a powerful aura and forcefully pushed the ghost adept back dozens of meters. It's you. The ghost adept stabilized his figure and raised his head. He saw a familiar face. It was none other than Nye Tian. It's that kid! The crowd exclaimed when they saw Nye Tian. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. No one had expected that the person who appeared at this moment would be Nye Tian. Previously, Nye Tian had represented Bailey Xingxue to challenge Yuan Ji. At that time, everyone thought that Nye Tian was an idiot. However, the strength that Nye Tian had displayed now was terrifying. He had actually used his aura to force the ghost adept back. At this moment, everyone suddenly realized that Nye Tian's strength was extremely strange. How can this kid be so strong? Yuan Ji frowned when he saw this scene from afar. His expression was extremely unsightly as he thought to himself coldly. He could unleash his aura to force the ghost adept back, but the prerequisite was that he had to activate the limitless heavenly seal. However, Nye Tian had completely relied on his aura to force the ghost adept back. He was truly powerful. At this moment, Yuan Ji was certain that he was no match for Nye Tian without using the limitless heavenly seal. In the next moment, Yuan Ji's eyes flickered with killing intent as his lips curled into a cold arc. This person can't be left alive. He could sense a strong threat from Nye Tian. Nye Tian's current cultivation was only at the pseudo-sacred stage. Once he grew to the pseudo-sacred stage, his strength would be unimaginable. Therefore, he had to kill Nye Tian before he grew stronger. In the first heaven of the sacred bloodline, Nye Tian looked at the ghost adept and said with a faint smile, "This is your strength? You're courting death." That ghostly cultivator's eyes trembled. After that, he let out a thunderous roar and took a step forward. A terrifying force appeared around him, causing the space around him to distort. A murderous aura filled the entire space. It was extremely terrifying. The crowd was shocked and quickly retreated. "Make your move." Nye Tian wore a calm expression as he said with a faint smile. "Damn it! I'll kill you!" The ghost adept was completely enraged. He let out a roar and slammed his palm forward. Instantly, a terrifying murderous storm appeared in the sky as it shot toward Nye Tian. Nye Tian unleashed his sword aura as he executed the starlight heavenly slash. A sword shadow swept across the sky, causing the sky to tremble as a powerful aura was unleashed. Boom! Bang! In the next instant, the two forces collided with each other, resulting in a deafening explosion. The ghost adept was sent flying 1,000 meters away before he managed to stabilize himself. "You dare to be so arrogant with such strength?" Nye Tian took a step forward. His eyes were filled with murderous intent as he stared at the ghost adept and said in a cold tone, "If you say that I'm an ant, then what are you?" The ghost adept's eyes trembled. Just when he wanted to say something, his body trembled and he vomited a mouthful of blood. "Humph!" Nye Tianling sneered and said without any hesitation, "It turns out that the so-called cultivators of the sacred world are so weak. You people always act all high and mighty, but it turns out that your true strength is so weak. What a joke!" The cold laughter resounded in everyone's ears, causing everyone's eyes to tremble. It turned out that the cultivators of the sacred world weren't as strong as they had imagined. At this moment, the way the crowd looked at Nye Tian slowly changed, because the latter's strength was simply too terrifying. What an arrogant ant cultivator! Do you really think that you're an expert? At that instant, a deep voice could be heard. Following this, another ghost adept appeared and stepped onto the first heaven of the sacred bloodline. Bang! 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 Following this, more ghost adepts appeared and descended onto the first heaven. Their eyes flickered with cold, murderous intent. It was obvious that Nye Tian's words had infuriated the ghost adepts. You want to fight? Come at me together then. Nye Tian's eyes sank as he spoke in a cold tone. His aura was extremely sharp and fearless. Chapter 3246. Heavenly Tao's Sacred Aura, Hiss. Everyone's eyes trembled violently when they saw how powerful Nye Tian was, and they sucked in a breath of cold air. It was unimaginable that a fifth-order pseudo-sacred martial cultivator would have to face more than 10 ninth-order pseudo-sacred martial cultivators from the sacred world at the same time. How strong would his martial heart be? Meanwhile, Nye Tian's expression was extremely calm. There was no fear in his eyes. Instead, his eyes were filled with a strong battle intent as a strange smile appeared on his lips. It was not an impulsive decision for him to face more than 10 ghostly cultivators at the same time. He had done it on purpose. As soon as he stepped into the first layer heaven of the sacred bloodline, he could sense a strange force in the surrounding space, which greatly improved his martial physique. To be more precise, it greatly improved the heavenly Tao formation in his body. The heavenly Tao formation became extremely active under the stimulation of the force, causing Nye Tian's martial physique to feel like it was bursting with power. Even the 9 shackles of the Tao of the heaven were very active, unleashing strands of Tao power that infiltrated Nye Tian's martial body, causing his meridians, bones, and blood to feel as if they were growing stronger and stronger. The sacred aura has resonated with the heavenly force, thus your strength has greatly improved. While Nye Tian was in shock, the ghost monarch's voice could be heard. Nye Tian nodded his head and wore a faint smile. He had no idea what the sacred aura was, but the strange aura in the surrounding space made him feel extremely comfortable, as if he was bathing in a spring breeze. If it wasn't for the resonance of the heavenly Tao, he would not have been able to injure a ghostly cultivator so easily. Therefore, he had a high chance of winning even if he were to face more than 10 ghostly cultivators at the same time. Reckless ant, do you really think you're invincible just because you defeated a ghostly cultivator? A ghostly cultivator took a step forward and let out a roar. His figure soared into the sky and slashed down with a giant saber in his hand. Bang! Instantly, a brilliant saber shadow appeared in the sky. The saber ray traveled a few 10,000 meters in the direction of Nye Tian. Hum! The terrifying saber shadow let out a dull saber cry in the air, like the roar of a wild beast. The terrifying pressure caused the void to tremble. It was incomparably violent. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. This ghost realm expert was extremely brutal and attacked without any hesitation. If Nye Tian retreated now, the people around him would definitely suffer. Nye Tian had to take this attack head-on. 9 limits of the starry sky, starfall. Nye Tian's eyes flickered with a similar expression. The corners of his mouth twitched as he slashed out with the starry heavenly slash. The sword image whistled like a dragon as it rushed out tyrannically. Boom! 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 The saber and the sword collided, causing the void to tremble. Instantly, the saber light and the sword shadows surged. Waves of violent energy wreaked havoc in the void. Nye Tian felt a violent saber chi descend upon him, causing his body to tremble. The terrifying force actually caused the 9th Heaven Saint bloodline to tremble. Bang! On the other hand, the Ghost Realm expert was sent flying after a dull thud, leaving a bloody trail in the air. This Ghost Realm expert was asking for trouble by trying to fight Nye Tian head-on. This Nie Tion's shocking performance caused everyone to inhale a mouthful of cold air. Their eyes trembled in shock. Who would have thought that a pseudo-sacred martial cultivator would be able to unleash such a terrifying force in an instant? Damn it! Let's attack together and kill this brat! The other Ghost Realm experts immediately roared upon seeing this scene. They unleashed their auras crazily, causing the void to tremble. All of you back off. Let me handle this. At this moment a voice sounded out. A Ghost Realm expert walked out and stared at Nie Tion coldly. He said in a cold voice. Nie Tion's eyes narrowed slightly and his heart sank. This Ghost Realm expert's aura was somewhat different from the others. Even the mask on his face was extremely strange. Left. The other Ghost Realm experts exclaimed in shock when they saw the Ghost Realm expert. It was obvious that they were extremely afraid. From the looks of it, this Ghost Executioner on the left was not a simple character. You can live if you block one of my moves. At this moment, the Ghost Realm expert on the left spoke coldly. His eyes were cold to the extreme, without any expression. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, a violent aura surged from the Ghost Realm expert's body. It was as if a huge wave had suddenly exploded, and the terrifying aura vibrated in the void. Nie Tion's eyes narrowed slightly. The strength of the Ghost Realm expert on the left was indeed not something an ordinary Ghost Realm expert could compare to. Whale Devour! In the next moment, the Ghost Realm expert on the left opened his mouth coldly. Suddenly, a wave of aura appeared and condensed into a giant beast in the void. It surged out like a tsunami, filling the entire space with a raging aura. The Ghost Realm expert on the left was actually a water attribute martial cultivator. The water attribute was a very common attribute, and it was actually disadvantageous to the combat strength of a martial cultivator in the later stages. However, the Ghost Realm expert on the left had displayed the agitation and vigor of the water attribute to the limit. It was extremely terrifying. 9 limits of the starry sky, sun annihilation. Nie Tion reacted instantly. The starry sky slash was unleashed, and a sword shadow blasted out. The void suddenly trembled, and the heavens and earth turned solemn. Rumble! High up in the sky, a roar sounded, and the entire world seemed to be trembling. It was extremely terrifying. At this moment, a violent impact surged from high up in the sky. Nie Tion resisted with all his might, but he was still forced to retreat dozens of meters. On the other hand, the Ghost Realm expert on the left was like a mountain in the raging waves, not moving an inch. His aura was extremely powerful. Just by standing there, he was like a mountain that could not be shaken by the heavens and earth. Nie Tion stabilized his body, and a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He retreated and was injured, but he blocked the attack from the Ghost Realm expert on the left. However, under the impact of the huge force, the 9 levels of the Saint bloodline shook, as if it was about to collapse. Oh no! The Ghost Realm expert and the myriad territory associations president exclaimed in shock when they saw this scene from afar. If the 9 levels of the Saint bloodline collapsed, the Heaven and Earth Saint bloodline would not be able to open again. Fortunately, the 9 levels of the Saint bloodline only shook for a while before it stabilized. The Ghost Realm expert and the Ghost Realm expert heaved a sigh of relief, and their tensed faces relaxed. By blocking my attack, you have won a chance to live. At this moment, the Ghost Realm expert on the left looked at Nie Tion and said coldly. His eyes were cold, and there was not the slightest fluctuation. It seemed that he did not care that he did not kill Nie Tion. Nie Tion's brows furrowed slightly as he made a mental note of this ghost executioner called left. Fortunately, he was at the first level of the Saint bloodline and had the support of the Heavenly Tao Resonant. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for him to block the Ghost Realm expert's attack. However, the Ghost Realm expert did not kill him, but the other Ghost Realm experts were full of killing intent, and they had no intention of stopping. All of you stop. At this moment, the Ghost Realm expert's figure appeared, and his gaze swept across everyone. He said loudly, "The conflict just now ends here. Fighting is not allowed in the 9 levels of the Saint bloodline. If you want to fight, there will be a chance later." Chapter 3247. The 9th layer. The Ghost Venerate's voice silenced the crowd. Although the Ghost Venerate was unwilling, they did not dare to disobey the Ghost Venerate. As for the cultivators of the Myriad Domains Guild, they did not dare to show any dissatisfaction. Nye Tian looked at the Ghost Monarch and his eyes narrowed slightly. There was a faint feeling of uneasiness in his heart. He felt that the 1,000 ghosts congregate was not just for the heaven and earth saint veins. The 1,000 ghosts congregate must have other intentions. Now, let's focus on challenging the 9th layer of the saint bloodline, the Ghost Venerate said coldly and returned to the side of the person who detected it. After a moment of silence, the crowd began to challenge the 9th layer of the saint bloodline. "Nye Tian, are you alright?" Bailey Xingxue came to Nye Tian's side and asked worriedly. "I'm fine." Nye Tian smiled calmly. Bailey Xingxue was confused. He was curious as to why Nye Tian's strength had suddenly increased so much. The Ghost Venerate named Lefthead had terrifying strength. Even Bailey Xingxue at his peak might not be his match. However, it was strange that Nye Tian was able to block Lefthead's attack without suffering any serious injuries. Bailey Xingxue could sense that Nye Tian's aura had become much stronger after entering the 9th layer of the Saint bloodline. It was strange. "Bailey Xingxue, Feng Wanhong, recover from your injuries first. We'll go to the 9th layer together," Nye Tian said with a smile as he fixed his gaze on the 9th layer of the Saint bloodline. Since he had already entered the 9th layer of the Saint bloodline, he naturally had to enter it. Furthermore, he had a bet with the Ghost Venerate. The 9th layer of the Saint bloodline was filled with dense Saint aura, which was very helpful for the recovery of cultivators. With Bailey Xingxue and Feng Wanhong's talents, they should be able to recover quickly. Bailey Xingxue and Feng Wanhong recovered their strength, while Nye Tian and Luoho began to observe the 9th layer of the Saint bloodline. The Saint bloodline 9 heavens were nurtured by the heaven and earth saint veins. Every single heavens was formed by a huge saint aura vortex. From the 1st heaven to the 9th heaven, the sacred aura grew stronger and stronger. Lord Nye Tian, below the 9th heaven should be the heaven and earth saint meridians, right? Luoho could not help but ask as he looked at the 9th heaven. "It should be." Nye Tian nodded slightly and said with uncertainty. The heaven and earth saint veins were located underground. The 9th heaven of the saint veins should be connected to the heaven and earth saint veins. However, Nye Tian didn't know much about heaven and earth holy veins, so he wasn't sure. Every layer of the 9 layers of sacred veins was several thousand meters tall. When a cultivator entered, they would be suppressed by the sacred aura, unable to increase their speed. Entering the 1st heaven of the Saint Pulse was not an easy task. Even if everything went smoothly, it would still take a long time. Nye Tian was not in a hurry. He planned to wait for Bailey Xingxue and Feng Wanhong to recover their strength first. 3 days later, Bailey Xingxue and Feng Wanhong had more or less recovered their strength. Nye Tian examined the 2 of them with his divine sense. After confirming that they had recovered, he said with a plain tone, "Let's begin." Following that, Nye Tian and the rest began to move towards the 9th heaven of the Saint Pulse. The 9 layers of the Saint Pulse were harder to climb than the previous one. 10 days later, Nye Tian, Bailey Xingxue, and Feng Wanhong had already reached the 7th heaven. Luoho stopped at the 6th heaven. His talent was already considered pretty good. At this moment, there were only a few cultivators around Nye Tian and the rest. However, Nye Tian discovered that all the specters had entered the 7th heaven. Furthermore, they did not stop and continued to advance towards the 9th heaven. The talent of these specters was stronger than Nye Tian had imagined. Actually, this wasn't strange. The myriad specters were here for the heaven and earth Saint Pulse, so they would definitely choose cultivators with great talent. Furthermore, these specters were people of the sacred world. Living in the environment of the sacred world every day, they were more accustomed to the pressure of the sacred aura. Brat, I'll be waiting for you in the 9th heaven. At this moment, a pair of cold eyes locked onto Lin Fan from the 8th heaven. Nie Tian looked at the person. It was the specter who had made a bet with him. This specter had actually reached the 8th heaven. Sure. Nie Tian smiled and accepted the specter's provocation. Following that, they continued to advance towards the 9th heaven. In the blink of an eye, 5 days later, Nie Tian, Bailey Xingxue, and Feng Wanhong had successfully reached the 9th heaven. The instant they entered the 9th heaven, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression changed. He could sense that the 9th layer of heaven was filled with a strange aura that exerted great pressure on his martial body. What's going on? Nie Tian frowned and couldn't help but panic. This is the pressure from the sacred meridians. As soon as he finished speaking, the ghost monarch exclaimed, "The 9th heaven of the sacred meridians is very close to the sacred meridians. Therefore, the space here is filled with the pressure from the sacred meridians." Nie Tian frowned and his expression sank. He glanced at Bailey Xingxue and Feng Wanhong. The latter two's strength was obviously being suppressed. Following this, he looked at the specters and realized that their strength was not being suppressed at all. Strange. Nie Tian's eyes flickered with astonishment. However, in the next moment, he discovered something strange. The masks on the faces of the specters were emitting a strange aura, which was resisting the pressure from the sacred meridians. So there's something wrong with the masks on their faces. Nie Tian's lips twitched as he came to a realization. No wonder the specter who made a bet with him panicked when he heard that he was going to remove his mask. It turned out that the specter mask had this effect. "Aunt, you really didn't disappoint me. You've indeed arrived at the 9th heaven." At that moment, the specter who made a bet with Nie Tian glanced at him and said coldly, "You're not bad yourself." "You're not bad yourself," Nie Tian said with a smile. "You came to the 9th heaven with a mask." He finally understood why these specters were able to enter the 9th heaven so easily. It wasn't because of their talent, but because of the masks on their faces. Since the specter mask could resist the pressure from the sacred meridians, the pressure from the sacred aura was nothing to be afraid of. "Kid, you're pretty smart." The specter smiled cold as a murderous intent flickered in his eyes. "Cut the crap. Opening the sacred meridians is more important." Meanwhile, the ghost fiend called the left spoke coldly while he gazed at the area beneath the 9th level with a burning gaze. Numerous tentacles were dancing about there, and they were filled with terrifying energy as if they intended to tear everything apart. Sacred meridian tentacles. Nie Tian was shocked when he looked over. Chapter 3248. Awakening the tentacles. Nie Tian was no stranger to the sacred bloodline tentacles. When he first entered the Tian Xing mountain range, he had seen a sacred bloodline tentacle in a valley and met a mysterious purple-shirt lady. However, the purple-shirt lady seemed to have vanished into thin air. "I wonder where that purple-shirt lady is now." Nie Tian frowned as he thought of the purple-shirt lady, feeling slightly worried. It was too strange for the purple-shirt lady's aura to disappear all of a sudden and disappear without a trace. Somehow, Nie Tian felt that the purple-shirt lady must be related to the 10,000 ghosts flowing together. Nie Tian withdrew his thoughts and looked at the head on the left, wondering how the latter was going to activate the sacred meridians. "Do it." The head on the left glanced at the ghost practitioners and said cold, before turning to Nie Tian and the rest, "You guys do the same." Nie Tian nodded without saying a word. Following this, the figure on the left flew toward the sacred bloodline tentacles. At that instant, the sacred bloodline tentacles seemed to have sensed something and immediately became active, reaching out wildly like thousands of snakes dancing wildly. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 sacred bloodline tentacles reached out simultaneously and covered the head on the left. Nie Tian squinted his eyes and saw through the transparent tentacles that the head on the left was unleashing the power of the sacred bloodline tentacles, as if it was trying to activate the power of the sacred bloodline tentacles. Buzz! In the next instant, a deep rumble was heard from the bottom of the ninth heaven, as if some terrifying force had been activated. This guy is impressive indeed, to be able to activate the power of 40 sacred bloodline tentacles at the same time. The voice of the Ghost Monarch could be heard. Ghost Monarch, what do you mean? Does it mean that I need to activate the power of the sacred bloodline tentacles to activate the sacred bloodline? Nie Tian asked with a confused expression. The sacred bloodline tentacles are the energy emitted from the sacred bloodline. The Ghost Monarch said in a deep voice, to activate the sacred bloodline tentacles, one must try their best to activate the energy within the sacred bloodline tentacles and activate the sacred bloodline. The more talented a martial artist is, the more Saint Vein tentacles they can activate. This guy named Lefty is able to activate 40 Saint Vein tentacles at the same time. His talent is truly shocking. So that's how it is. Nie Tian couldn't help but smile. He was looking forward to seeing how many tentacles he could activate. Following that, the other ghost attendants also moved and moved closer. More Saint Bloodline tentacles were attracted over, and their auras were extremely violent, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The Saint Bloodline tentacles danced wildly, wrapping around the Ghost One. However, the talents of these ghostly practitioners were clearly inferior to those on the left. Most ghost practitioners could only activate 1 or 2 Saint Vein tentacles. Even the stronger ones could only activate 4 or 5 Saint Vein tentacles. From this, it could be seen that the talent of the left-hand head was far greater than that of the other ghost practitioners. It was no wonder that the Ghost Emperor described it as world-shaking. Then, the other martial artists who had entered the ninth heaven moved. At this moment, there were more than 100 warriors in the ninth heaven. However, most of them could only activate 1 or 2 Saint Vein tentacles. The energy fluctuations below the ninth heaven were more obvious, but the heaven and earth Saint Veins showed no signs of activating. Let me do it. At this moment, a violent voice sounded, and a figure flew over. Yuan-ji. Nie Tian was slightly stunned. Seeing that it was Yuan-ji, his eyes flickered with anticipation. Yuan-ji's bloodline power was very strong, and he should be able to activate many Saint Vein tentacles. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. As Yuan-ji landed, more than 10 Saint Vein tentacles sensed his presence and extended over, enveloping him. Nie Tian took a look. Yuan-ji had activated a total of 12 Saint Vein tentacles, which was far more than the other martial artists. However, compared to the left-hand head, it was still a far cry. Damn it! Yuan-ji roared angrily, clearly dissatisfied with his performance. He could already tell that the number of Saint Vein tentacles represented the talent of a martial artist. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. At this moment, another figure appeared with many Saint Vein tentacles. It was Feng Wanhong. 10. Nie Tian's eyes dimmed as he mumbled. Feng Wanhong had activated 10 Saint Vein tentacles, but he was still weaker than Yuan-ji. It's my turn, Bailey Xingxue said, and his figure moved closer to the Saint Vein tentacles. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. As soon as his figure landed, more than 10 Saint Vein tentacles moved at the same time and extended over him, instantly enveloping him. Nie Tian's eyes flickered with astonishment. Bailey Xingxue had activated exactly 40 Saint Vein tentacles, the same number as the left-hand head. This meant that Bailey Xingxue's talent should be on par with the left-hand head. Nie Tian was slightly disappointed. In his opinion, Bailey Xingxue was stronger than the left-hand head. Outside the ninth heaven, the Ghost Venerate's eyes narrowed as he stared at Bailey Xingxue in astonishment. This person's talent is not below that of the left-hand head. Incredible! The left-hand head is someone who possesses that kind of power. The Ghost Venerate's eyes trembled as he thought to himself, What's the name of this white-robed swordsman? Then, he calmed down and asked the man beside him. His name is Bailey Xingxue, the leader of the 9 princes of the Myriad Domains Guild. The man's eyes narrowed slightly as if he did not want to say it, but after some hesitation, he still said it. So it's the leader of the 9 princes. The ghost venerate laughed. He actually knew about the 9 princes. Then, the ghost venerate's eyes flickered as he locked his gaze on a silver-haired martial artist. Nye Tian. He really wanted to know how many Saint Vein tentacles Nye Tian could activate. The number of Saint Vein tentacles activated determined whether the Saint Vein could be activated or not. Only when enough Saint Vein tentacles were activated could the Saint Vein be activated. And the more Saint Vein tentacles were activated, the faster the Saint Vein would be activated. At this moment, the man's eyes were also blazing with excitement as he stared at Nye Tian from afar. At the same time, in the 9th heaven, Nye Tian's figure moved. Like a ray of light, he rapidly approached the Saint Vein tentacles. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Just as his figure landed, the vast expanse of Saint Vein tentacles sensed him at the same time and instantly became violent. They danced wildly in the air like raging waves, surging towards Nye Tian. On the left-hand side, Bailey Xingxue and the others were completely stunned when they saw the scene in front of them. They could not believe their eyes. Chapter 3249. An ant is not worthy. Floating in midair, Nye Tian's entire body was enveloped by countless Saint bloodline tentacles, making him look like a huge vortex of Saint bloodlines. The people around him were completely dumbfounded. Their blank faces were filled with disbelief. At this moment, Nye Tian had activated at least 8,000 Saint bloodline tentacles, if not 10,000. Such a scene was too shocking and indescribable. Outside the 9th heaven, the ghost venerate and Zhen Jiren were petrified, unable to utter a word for a long time. The ghost venerate was mentally prepared for Nye Tian to give him a big surprise. After all, a rank 5 pseudo-sacred martial artist who grew up in the realm could fight against a rank 9 pseudo-sacred martial artist in the sacred world. His talent was unimaginable. The ghost venerate had a rough guess in his heart that Nye Tian could activate 100 Saint Vein tentacles. Even the most monstrous martial artists in the sacred world might not be able to activate 100 Saint Vein tentacles at the same time. However, the scene before him made him realize that he had underestimated Nye Tian. Nye Tian had activated close to 10,000 Saint Vein tentacles at the same time. 10,000! A total of 10,000. The ghost venerate even suspected that the martial artist in front of him was not human at all. This kid is too terrifying, the ghost venerate said in a deep voice after a long time. The others in the 9th heaven were not too shocked, just a little confused. They did not understand what it meant to activate close to 10,000 Saint Vein tentacles at the same time. At the same time, in the 9th heaven of the Saint Vein, Nye Tian was surrounded by countless Saint Vein tentacles. He could feel the blood in his body boiling and flowing violently. He could feel that his martial physique was slowly being improved, becoming stronger bit by bit. Boom! However, at this moment, a loud explosion suddenly came from the 9th heaven, as if a huge crack had appeared between heaven and earth. In the ocean of Saint Vein tentacles, a huge crack appeared and instantly expanded. Boundless Saint Vein energy surged out like a tsunami. In an instant, everyone could feel the joy of the impact of the Saint Vein. The heaven and earth Saint Vein is about to open. When the ghost venerable saw this scene, his face suddenly changed. His eyes were blazing to the extreme, and the excitement in his heart could no longer be contained. Rumble! Then, the crack below began to expand. In the blink of an eye, it was already thousands of meters wide. Such a scene was like the earth being torn apart and a door to hell opened. Bang! 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 At the same time, the 9 heavens of the Saint bloodline in the sky began to explode. Layers upon layers of Saint aura vortexes exploded, turning into ripples of saint aura that spread out in the void. Following that, the crack on the ground expanded rapidly, as if the entire land was about to be split into two. The eyes of the crowd trembled, their faces filled with astonishment. The fear in their hearts had reached its peak. The scene in front of them was like the end of the world. The tentacles surrounding Tian and the others slowly disappeared, as if they had never existed. "It's him." The ghost hunters were flabbergasted as they turned to look at Tian, their eyes filled with shock. It seemed like Tian had single-handedly opened the heaven and earth saint vein. Tian frowned with a dark expression. He did not expect the opening of the heaven and earth saint vein to be like this. The giant crack on the ground was so big that it was impossible to see the end of it. The entire Tianqing mountain range was split into two. Tian looked at the crack below and could sense a strange aura, which felt like the aura of some kind of seal, a very powerful seal. An ant from the realm is not worthy of opening the heaven and earth saint vein. At that instant, a murderous voice could be heard all of a sudden, followed by a terrifying aura charging toward Tian. Tian immediately turned around and stared at the person who made the move. His eyes flickered coldly. The person who made the move was the Ghost Venerable who had made a bet with him. The Ghost Venerable seemed to be terrified by Tian's talent, causing him to go berserk. "Piss off!" In the next instant, Tian's eyes darkened as he let out a roar. The starlight heavenly slash appeared in his hand as he slashed forward. Bang! As the shadow of the sword was unleashed, a powerful aura swept toward the Ghost Venerable. Following this, a shocking scene took place. The Ghost Venerable did not have the chance to resist, as he was engulfed by the shadow of the sword, leaving nothing behind. Tian frowned as he was overjoyed when he sensed something. He did not expect his strength to have a breakthrough in that instant. That's right, under the stimulation of the sacred vein tentacles, Tian's strength had improved from the 5th grade sacred realm to the 6th grade sacred realm. After his strength improved, a casual stab from Tian had instantly killed the Ghost Venerable. Gasp! The eyes of the crowd flickered as they inhaled deeply upon seeing this. The speed of Tian's growth had exceeded everyone's expectations. "I'm an ant? I'm not worthy? What a joke!" After Tian killed the Ghost Venerable, Lung let out a deep roar as his eyes turned murderous. The other Ghost Venerables looked at him with fear instead of anger or murderous intent. Only the person on the left remained calm as he stared at Tian coldly. Bang! At this moment, an incomparably enormous power suddenly surged out from the huge crack on the ground. It appeared in a mighty manner, like a river bursting its banks. It was majestic and boundless. Tian's eyes flickered with a hint of burning desire. He took out the sacred origin blood jade without hesitation and prepared to absorb the energy to unseal the sacred runes. 3 of the 9 sacred runes in the sacred origin blood jade had been unsealed, leaving 6 more to be unsealed. With a thought from Tian, the sacred origin blood jade sensed it and began to frantically absorb the energy like a black hole, greedily and violently. The energy coming from below was tremendous. In the blink of an eye, Tian sensed that one of the sacred origin blood jades, sacred origin blood jade, had been unsealed. "It's unsealed." Tian was pleasantly surprised. Then, he prepared to unseal the next sacred rune. However, the violent energy coming from below suddenly stopped. Tian's eyebrows furrowed, and his face grew grim as he sensed a powerful sealing aura. At that moment, the crack on the ground had been completely opened. However, what was revealed was not the sacred vein, but a huge seal barrier. Tian's expression flickered with astonishment. Sealed? How could he have imagined that there was a huge seal outside the sacred vein? At the same time, high up in the sky. Angelic seal. The Ghost Venerable looked at the huge seal barrier in the crack on the ground and exclaimed, his eyes blazing. After waiting for so long, he finally saw the angelic seal. Chapter 3250. The Angelic Seal. The ghost venerate stared at the huge barrier that had emerged from the ground. Its eyes were burning with excitement, like a trapped beast that was about to break out of its cage. The myriad ghosts had come to the Tianqing territory not for the sacred veins, but for the angelic seal. There was a huge secret behind the angelic seal. Nie Tian frowned when he saw the ghost venerate's reaction. The ghost venerate was not surprised, but excited. This meant that he had long known about the existence of the seal. What is hidden behind the seal? Nie Tian thought to himself, his eyes flickering. At this moment, there was a strong sense of uneasiness in his heart. Retreat! At this moment, the ghost emperor's voice was suddenly heard, as he shouted in panic. Retreat! Nie Tian was stunned for a moment before he reacted. With a roar, a pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back, and his figure turned into a streak of light as he retreated frantically. Bailey Xingxue and the others beside him reacted instantly and retreated as well. The other martial artists did not know what was happening, but they all moved and retreated. However, there were also many martial artists who stood on the spot with blank faces, not moving an inch. Boom! At this moment, the huge barrier in the ground suddenly trembled, and a tremendous force was released. The terrifying force formed a huge ripple in the sky, as if the entire sky and earth had turned into a roaring sea. Boom, boom, boom! The terrifying force rumbled unceasingly, spreading towards the crowd. In the next moment, an extremely tragic scene took place. The frightening ripples created by the seal caused blood to rain everywhere. Those cultivators who didn't manage to dodge in time actually turned into blood mist and dissipated in the air. They didn't even have time to scream in agony. In the void, the sky and earth seemed to be shrouded under a huge dark red curtain, and the air was filled with the smell of blood. The power of the ripple formed by the seal was beyond imagination. What kind of seal is this? How can it be so powerful? Nie Tian looked at the scene in the sky, his face pale and shocked. His figure retreated tens of thousands of meters away, but he was still affected by the residual power of the ripples. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The others who were pushed away were in a similar situation as Nie Tian. Many of them were even seriously injured. Nie Tian's martial body was so powerful, yet he was still injured. The situation of the others could be imagined. No one had expected the seal beneath the ground to be so powerful. However, those ghosts were completely fine. This time, it was the ghost mask that protected them. Not only could that strange mask resist the pressure of the Saint bloodline, but it could also resist the impact of the seal. It was really strange. It's already been millions of years. I didn't expect the power of the angel seal to still be so strong. The ghost venerate looked at the seal below with a sharp light in its eyes. However, a moment later, his lips curled into a sinister smile, and he said cold, "Holy Feather Race, it's time to return blood for blood. Lord Ghost Venerate, you want to." The Ghost Venerate seemed to have sensed something. His expression changed, and he looked at the Ghost Venerate with trembling eyes, unable to say a word. "Ghost Venerate, I will not forget what you have done for the 10,000 ghosts flow together." The Ghost Venerate laughed, his eyes flashing with a sharp light, and said, "Now you can step back." Then, the Ghost Venerate moved and flew toward the seal underground. What is he doing? When everyone saw the Ghost Venerate's figure, they couldn't help but tremble and exclaim. The seal underground was so terrifying, yet the Ghost Venerate still dared to rush over. Wasn't he courting death? Huh! Nie Tian looked at the Ghost Venerate's figure and his eyes narrowed slightly. The feeling of uneasiness in his heart became even stronger. 10,000 ghosts flow together, 10,000 ghost wings, open. At that moment, the Ghost Venerate said in a low voice in mid-air, like muffled thunder, shaking the void. As soon as he finished speaking, a pair of black wings appeared on his back and instantly expanded. When they were fully spread out, they were actually tens of thousands of meters wide. They were like a huge curtain that covered the sky, causing the entire world to instantly darken. At that moment, everyone present felt a very terrifying pressure, and many people vomited blood on the spot. Nietion's figure retreated again. His eyes couldn't help but tremble, and the shock in his heart was indescribable. He knew that the ghost venerate's strength must be very terrifying, far surpassing the average ghost cultivator. But he didn't expect the ghost venerate to be so terrifying. It was unimaginably strong. Without a doubt, the ghost venerate must be a Saint Realm martial artist. Judging from the aura, the ghost venerate was even stronger than the heaven's chosen one that Nietion had encountered before, who looked exactly like Cher. When the others saw this, they were even more dumbfounded. They stood rooted to the ground, unable to believe their eyes. It was hard to imagine that such a small body could release such a terrifying power in an instant. 10,000 ghosts howl, heaven and earth tremble. Then, the ghost venerate opened his mouth again. His low voice resounded between heaven and earth, like an echo from hell, terrifying. QL 11-inch hee. In the next moment, the 10,000 ghost wings on the ghost venerate's back flapped, and then there was an incomparably mournful howl coming from the void. It really sounded like 10,000 ghosts were howling. Waves of power rushed into the void, and actually suppressed the power of the angelic seal. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. The fear in their hearts was perfectly written on their faces. The ghostly howl in the void was shrill and ear-piercing, as if it was going to shatter one's eardrums. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. At that moment, the ghost venerate moved his hands. Suddenly, the 10,000 ghost wings on his back burst apart, turning into countless ghostly faces in the air. It was like a dark tide, and it surged towards the angelic seal. What is he trying to do? When Nietion saw this, his eyes narrowed and he exclaimed in surprise. Could it be that the ghost venerate wants to break the angelic seal by force? He doesn't want to break the seal, he wants to find the eye of the seal. At that moment, the ghost emperor's voice sounded, and he said in a deep voice. It was undeniable that the ghost venerate was very strong, but it was obviously impossible for him to break the angelic seal by force. As the ghost emperor's voice fell, the ghostly faces fell on the seal like a stormy sea, and then they penetrated into the seal. It was very strange. Then there was dead silence. The ghost venerate's figure stood in the air, and his eyes were shining brightly. Beads of sweat gradually appeared on his forehead, and even the corner of his mouth was bleeding. Maintaining the 10,000 ghost wings was a heavy burden for him, and it wasn't an easy thing to do. Everyone looked at the ghost venerate, and they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. After a long time, above the huge seal, suddenly there was a whirlpool, and it surged crazily like a hurricane, extremely violent. Chapter 32:51. As the sealing eye appeared, the ghost emperor's eyes trembled. He could no longer suppress the excitement in his eyes. The myriad demons had been waiting for so long just to open the angelic seal, to open the sealing eye. QL 11. The Ghost Lord's mood at this moment was simply indescribably excited. Looking at this scene, the eyes of the ghost executioner on the left were filled with excitement as well. They all knew what was buried under the angelic seal. The thing that the myriad demons desired the most was hidden under the seal. The sealing eye? What is the ghost emperor trying to do? Nietion stared at the sealing eye with trembling eyes. The uneasiness in his heart had reached its limit. He's trying to break the seal. Almost at the same time, the ghost emperor's voice rang out. His face was filled with shock, and the corners of his mouth twitched, but he was trembling, unable to speak. Break the seal. Nietion was startled. He frowned when he saw the ghost emperor's strange expression. The sacred vein was most likely under the seal. What was wrong with the ghost emperor trying to break the seal? Why was the ghost emperor so nervous? Ghost emperor, are you all right? Nietion became cold and asked in a deep voice. I'm fine. The ghost emperor's voice was trembling. Although he said that he was fine, his face was filled with fear, as if he had seen something terrifying. Nie Tian wore an unpleasant expression. He had never seen the Ghost Emperor so nervous before. What exactly did the Ghost Emperor discover? Nie Tian. A moment later, the Ghost Emperor calmed down slightly, but his voice was still trembling as he said, "I sensed a familiar aura." Eyebrows furrowed, Nie Tian asked, "What aura?" If it was a familiar aura, why was the Ghost Emperor panicking? Could it be something terrifying? The ancestor of all ghosts. The Ghost Emperor fell silent for a long time before uttering a name. His eyes were filled with a blank expression. The ancestor of all ghosts? Nie Tian was startled. He wore a confused look, wondering who the person was. The name sounded like an old monster that had lived for countless years. The Eye of Sealing has appeared. It's time for blood. At that moment, the Ghost Lord's voice rang out again. The mask on his face suddenly shattered, revealing a dark and ugly face. It didn't look like a human face at all, but more like a burnt skeleton. Blood for blood. What? As soon as the ghost finished speaking, he stretched out his hand and a blinding light appeared. It was a human figure. When Nie Tian saw the figure clearly, his eyes suddenly trembled, and he was extremely surprised. The figure was none other than the mysterious purple-robed woman. But at this moment, the girl in purple was restrained by a force and couldn't move at all. Her clear eyes were shining as she stared at the crowd around her in shock. Blood for blood. Blood for blood. Blood for blood. When all of the Ghost Realm experts saw the purple-clothed woman appear, their eyes became fanatical and they shouted loudly. The purple-robed girl stared at the crazed, ghostly practitioners, and her clear eyes trembled with extreme shock. What on earth are these people trying to do? Nie Tian roared inwardly as he tried to suppress his anger. No wonder the purple-robed girl's aura suddenly disappeared. It turned out that she had been captured by the Ghost Flow Together. The people of the Ghost Flow Together were so fanatical that they almost went crazy. What were they trying to do to the purple-robed girl? That purple-robed girl is from the Holy Feather Tribe. At that moment, the Ghost Emperor cried out in shock. The people of the Ghost Flow Together are trying to use her blood to open the seal. What do you mean? Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, and asked in astonishment. That seal has the aura of the Holy Feather Tribe. It must have been set up by the Holy Feather Tribe. The purple-robed girl is from the Holy Feather Tribe. By injecting her blood into the Eye of Sealing, the seal can be opened, the Ghost Emperor said in a low voice. Although he was trying his best to remain calm, it was obvious that he was panicking. Could it be that the person trapped under the seal is from the Ghost Flow Together? Nie Tian asked with a frown. It's the All-Ghost Ancestor, the Ghost Emperor said in a low voice, once again mentioning the name of the All-Ghost Ancestor. Nie Tian was shocked. The All-Ghost Ancestor must be a very terrifying person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been sealed in a heaven and earth sacred vein. The person who sealed the All-Ghost Ancestor must have some kind of extraordinary ability to seal a person in a heaven and earth sacred vein. This kind of ability was beyond imagination. The purple-robed girl was like a sacrifice, using her blood as a sacrifice to open the seal. The purple-robed girl was from the Holy Feather Tribe. No wonder her aura was so similar to Aya's. Aya was from the Sky Feather Tribe, so she should be from the same race as the Holy Feather Tribe. Nie Tian, you must stop the All-Ghost Flow Together. You can't let the All-Ghost Ancestor open the seal. At that moment, the Ghost Emperor said in panic. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and his expression stiffened. He really wanted to stop the Ghost Emperor, but was he strong enough to do so? The power that the Ghost Emperor had displayed just now was unimaginable. Even if Nie Tian activated his celestial body, he might not be able to fight against it. Holy Feather Tribe, you have sealed the All-Ghost Ancestor for so long. It's time for the seal to be lifted. The Ghost Emperor said in a deep voice. Its dark face trembled, and its expression was extremely fanatical. Its voice was deep and murderous, as if it was echoing in hell. The day the all-ghost ancestor awakens will be the day your holy feather tribe will be exterminated. The ghost emperor roared furiously. After saying that, he reached out his hand, and a sealing rune appeared in his palm. He slammed it into the purple-robed girl's body. The moment the sealing rune entered her body, the purple-robed girl's body trembled, and she let out a piercing scream of agony. The sealing rune was extremely terrifying. It turned into an endless force that wreaked havoc in her body, as if it was going to tear her body apart. In the next instant, a tragic scene took place. Bang! 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 Many bloody wounds suddenly appeared on the purple-robed girl's body. It was as if sharp blades were slicing through her body from the inside. Her entire body was instantly dyed red with blood. The bloody scene caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air. Their expressions suddenly changed, and they were shocked to the extreme. No one had expected that someone of the Ghost Emperor's status would torture a little girl like this. The Holy Feather Tribe owes the all-ghost flow together. It will be repaid with your blood. However, the Ghost Emperor seemed to have gone mad. He yelled loudly and pushed his hand forward. A terrifying force appeared and pushed the purple-robed girl toward the sealing eye. However, at that moment, a figure appeared in the sky like a ray of light. It flew over and caught the purple-robed girl. Chapter 32:52. The Nine-Winged Sovereign. High up in the sky, the person who saved the purple-clothed girl in time was none other than Nyetian. "Brat, it's you." The ghost monarch stared at Nyetian with a gloomy and cold look in his eyes, as if he couldn't wait to skin Nyetian alive. He was about to unseal the angel seal. How could he be obstructed at this time? Boom! Nyetian ignored the ghost venerable. A sword intent gushed out from his palm and forcefully broke the power binding the purple-clothed girl. "You!" The purple-clothed girl's body trembled slightly. She looked at Nyetian and was about to speak, but she fainted. The rune that invaded her body was still wreaking havoc. On her body, bloody wounds opened up and blood flowed out like a fountain. She had lost too much blood. If she couldn't force the rune out of her body at this time, it wouldn't be long before she died of blood exhaustion. Damn it! Nyetian frowned and growled. Then, he released the power of the stars from his body. Like a raging wave, it rushed into the purple-clothed girl's body. Suddenly, the wounds on the purple-clothed girl's body were impacted. Blood flowed faster and her entire body seemed to wither in an instant. Nyetian's eyes trembled, worried that the purple-clothed girl wouldn't be able to hold on. At this time, more than a dozen ghost venerables rushed over and surrounded Nyetian. "Don't act rashly." But the ghost venerable exclaimed at this time, signaling the ghost venerables not to make a move. The purple-clothed girl was the key to unsealing the angel seal. If the ghost venerables attacked and accidentally killed her, it would be terrible. Nyetian glanced at the ghost venerable and the ghost venerables and ignored them. Instead, he focused his entire body, wanting to force the rune out of the purple-clothed girl's body. At this time, the blood flowing out of the purple-clothed girl's body danced in the air, as if it had a life of its own and slowly floated towards the sealing eye. Nyetian and the purple-clothed girl were too close to the sealing eye, and the sealing eye seemed to be very thirsty for the purple-clothed girl's blood. It was actually absorbing the purple-clothed girl's blood. Nyetian was so focused on the purple-clothed girl's life that he didn't notice this. But even if he found out, he wouldn't care, because saving people was more important. "Brat, she was hit by the 10,000 ghosts in talisman. With your strength, it's impossible to force the talisman out." The ghost venerable looked at Nyetian and said in a deep voice, "If you stop now, this venerable will pretend that nothing happened. You don't even know her, so it's not worth risking your life for her." The ghost venerable saw that the eye of the seal began to absorb the blood of the purple-clothed girl, but he was worried that only this blood was not enough to unlock the angel seal. Nye Tian, however, completely ignored him. His eyes were trembling slightly, and beads of sweat were oozing out of his forehead. At this moment, regardless of whether the purple-clothed girl could hold on or not, he had to continue. As long as he stopped, the purple-clothed girl would definitely die. Success! After a moment, Nye Tian's eyes flickered and he shouted in surprise. He had forced the 10,000 ghosts' talisman out of the purple-clothed girl's body. The moment the 10,000 ghosts' talisman left her body, the purple-clothed girl's lips trembled. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't. "Don't speak, I won't let you die," Nye Tian said in a deep voice, but he saw the purple-clothed girl's hand move, as if she was about to take something out. He was stunned for a moment, then immediately reacted. Without any scruples, he took out a white token from the purple-clothed girl's chest. When the purple-clothed girl saw the token, her eyes flashed with surprise. Then, she used all her strength to draw a talisman on the white token, and then dripped a drop of blood into the token. In the distance, the ghost venerable was stunned for a moment, then suddenly reacted and exclaimed, "Angel Sacred Token!" He didn't expect that the purple-clothed girl would have the Angel Sacred Token on her body. This was the highest level token of the angel race. Could this girl be? The ghost venerable's eyes trembled, as if he understood something. He paused for a moment and said, "Nine-winged paragon angel." The Holy Feather race was just a branch of the angel race. The Angel Sacred Token was the highest level token of the angel race, and there were no more than 10 of them in the entire angel race. Even the leader of the Holy Feather race might not have the Angel Sacred Token. The purple-clothed girl actually had the Angel Sacred Token, which meant that her status was not only in the Holy Feather race, but even in the entire angel race. The purple-clothed girl was very young, so it was obviously impossible for her to have an extremely high status because of her strength. In that case, there was only one possibility left. She was a member of the Holy Feather race who had the bloodline of the Nine-Winged Paragon. The bloodline of the Nine-Winged Paragon was the most powerful bloodline power of the angel race. No one knew how many years it had been since a Nine-Winged Paragon angel had appeared in the angel race. Haha, it seems that my luck is not bad. I actually caught an angel with the bloodline of the Nine-Winged Paragon. The ghost venerable's eyes trembled as he understood this, and he was pleasantly surprised. Buzz! However, at that moment, the Angel Sacred Token in the purple-clothed girl's hand suddenly let out a buzzing sound like a great bell. The sound of cranes crying in the 9 heavens carried the power to pierce through the clouds and crack rocks, and it shot straight into the sky. This sound caused everyone's eyes to tremble, and their expressions to be filled with horror. Such a warning sound made everyone's mind clear. Nye Tian was right next to the source of the sound, but he did not feel that it was ear-piercing. Instead, he felt very comfortable and there was great joy in his heart. Angel's voice. Angel's voice. Almost at the same time, the Ghost Emperor and the Ghost Venerable's voices suddenly sounded with great surprise. The two of them were really too shocked. The purple-clothed girl actually released the angel's voice. The angel's voice was a special way of communication between the angel race. This kind of sound, to the ears of outsiders, carried a sense of joy, but to the ears of the angel race, it could pass through the world barrier and locate the source of the sound. The purple-clothed girl released the angel's voice, obviously asking for help. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. After the purple-clothed girl released the angel's voice, she fell into a coma again. He sensed the purple-clothed girl's state. Although her breath was weak, it was still stable, and her life should not be in danger for the time being. After all, the purple-clothed girl was a martial artist with the bloodline of the Nine-Winged Paragon, and her vitality was extremely strong. Without a second thought, Nye Tian directly placed the purple-clothed girl into the 9 extremities. "You're courting death." When the Ghost Venerable saw the purple-clothed girl disappear, his eyes flickered, and he let out a deep roar furiously. He directly yelled at the ghost cultivators, Kill her! The ghost cultivators did not dare to make a move just now because they were worried about the purple-clothed girl next to Nyetian. Now that the purple-clothed girl was hidden by Nyetian, they no longer had any scruples. Besides, the purple-clothed girl's blood was almost drained. Even if they kept her alive, it would be useless, so they might as well kill her. Kill! In an instant, the ghost cultivators roared at the same time, and their auras surged like raging waves, striking the void, extremely terrifying. Chapter 32:53. A bloody battle. Boom, boom, boom. More than a dozen extremely violent forces pressed down on Nyetian from the sky. When everyone saw this scene, they could not help but tremble in fear. More than a dozen ghost immortals joined forces to kill Nyetian, who was only a 6th-stage pseudo-sacred martial sage. Such a scene was indeed rare. Sacred heaven-defying sword, sky sword reverses the sun. Nyetian frowned. His aura surged crazily, and a terrifying sword intent was released. Accompanied by his surging blood chi, the power of the sword intent was pushed to the extreme. Every ghost immortal was a 9th-stage pseudo-sacred powerhouse. It was hard to imagine how powerful their joint attack was, and Nyetian only had the strength of a 6th-stage pseudo-sacred powerhouse. He had to resist with all his might. Boom! In the next instant, the sword intent around him condensed, and a huge sword shadow appeared in midair. Like a giant dragon, it tumbled in the void with a majestic and terrifying aura. Rumble! Then, a terrifying force came crashing down. The void trembled, and heaven and earth trembled. Endless waves surged out, wreaking havoc in the space as if they were going to drown the entire world. Everyone's eyes were blazing and trembling. The shock in their hearts could not be any greater. Who would have thought that a 6th-stage pseudo-sacred powerhouse could withstand the joint attack of more than a dozen 9th-stage pseudo-sacred powerhouses? Bang! 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 At this moment, a terrifying force exploded, and the void seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. Nyetian's figure retreated thousands of meters. After stabilizing himself, he spat out a mouthful of blood. The dozen ghost immortals were also pushed back by the impact, and a few of them were even injured. How can this kid be so strong? The ghost venerate roared with a pair of sinister eyes when he saw this scene. In the distance, the ghost venerate's eyes trembled when he saw this scene. He was also extremely shocked. Even he, the leader of the Myriad Domain Guild, might not be able to withstand the joint attack of more than a dozen ghost immortals. Nyetian was just a young 6th-stage pseudo-sacred powerhouse. How could he be so terrifying? It was simply unbelievable. Kill! At this moment, an incomparably deep voice rang out in the sky, following which, a figure dashed out like a sharp sword, killing everything in its path. Nyetian! Bailey Xingxue couldn't help but cry out in alarm. He didn't expect that Nyetian would dare to take the initiative to attack in such a situation where there was such a huge disparity in strength. Bang! In the next moment, a ghostly cultivator was sent flying by Nyetian's sword before he could even react. His figure was engulfed in sword shadows, and not even his bones were left. However, it was at this moment that the other ghostly ones reacted to the situation. They attacked one after another, sending out powerful attacks towards Nyetian. Nyetian narrowed his eyes and activated the Star Soul shield and the Heavenly Water Pole armor at the same time. Bang bang bang! The terrifying power bombarded down, and Nyetian's figure was pushed back repeatedly. The Star Soul shield and the Heavenly Water Pole armor instantly shattered after withstanding a few attacks. Nyetian was pushed back tens of thousands of meters. There were several bloody wounds on his body, and it looked extremely tragic. Realm Ant Die. A ghostly cultivator looked at Nyetian with a murderous intent. He roared and rushed over. And Nyetian's eyes were bloodshot, and murderous intent surged in his eyes. He growled cold, "I'll kill you like slaughtering a dog." As his violent voice fell, he slashed out with his sword. The blood-colored sword shadow was like a wild dragon, causing the void to tremble as it charged towards the ghostly cultivator. Boom! The ghostly cultivator who was in midair suddenly felt the approaching killing intent. His eyes suddenly trembled, and he wanted to retreat, but it was too late. His figure was directly engulfed by the sword shadow, and he died tragically. When he saw that Nye Tian was covered in blood, he thought that the latter was seriously injured. He didn't expect that Nye Tian only suffered external injuries, which were not fatal. Did you see it clearly? Who's the ant here? Nye Tianling stood in the air, and his body shook. The blood stains on his body were washed away, and he swept his gaze across the remaining ghostly cultivators and roared like a wild beast. The ghostly cultivators were all shocked, and their eyes were trembling with fear. They looked down on Realmverse cultivators, and they had always thought that Realmverse cultivators were trash like ant. However, the appearance of Nye Tian had completely changed their view of Realmverse cultivators. At this moment, Nye Tian only had the strength of a 6th-tier pseudo-sage. Killing them was as easy as flipping his hand. If his strength was the same as theirs, he could simply crush them. The myriad domain guild's cultivators were also shocked by Nye Tian. Their eyes trembled, and their faces were filled with indescribable shock. Nye Tian was really too terrifying. The strength he displayed at this moment had subverted many people's understanding of the martial way. You bunch of trash, what are you still standing there for? Kill him for this, Lord. At this moment, the ghost venerate suddenly opened his mouth and roared. The ghostly cultivators reacted at this moment, and their auras surged again, causing the void to tremble. Come on. Nye Tian's battle intent was strong. With a low roar, a terrifying aura surged outside his body, and the sword in his hand trembled with blood dripping from it. The sword cry resounded clearly in the void. Boom, boom, boom. Then, a terrifying attack broke through the air, violently bombarding Nye Tian. 9 limits of the starry sky, sun extermination. Nye Tian roared, and the blood chi around his body surged. His sword aura rushed into the void, incomparably terrifying. Boom! In the next moment, a blood-colored sword shadow swept across the sky, and the surrounding space within tens of thousands of meters was shrouded in a dark red. Bang, bang, bang! Then, a terrifying collision sound rang out, and a terrifying force exploded, as if to devour everything. However, Nye Tian's figure did not retreat. Instead, he forcibly rushed through the violent waves and killed the group of ghostly cultivators. In just the blink of an eye, his figure had already arrived less than a kilometer away from the ghostly cultivators. Is this guy a madman? The ghostly cultivators looked at Nye Tian, who was covered in blood, and their eyes trembled. The fear in their hearts was all expressed on their faces. How could they have imagined that Nye Tian was so ferocious, and his martial body was like that of a primordial beast? How could an ordinary 6th-stage pseudo-sage powerhouse rush through such a powerful wave? Nye Tian was really terrifying. Die, all of you! Nye Tian's eyes were filled with murderous intent. With a low roar, his figure directly rushed over, and the power of his physical body erupted like a trapped beast rushing out of its cage. Boom! 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 In the next moment, the sword shadow in his hand flickered, and wherever his figure passed, there was a bloody light. 7 or 8 ghostly cultivators died tragically under Nye Tian's sword without any reaction at all. This is the end. However, at this moment, a deep and violent voice rang out in the void. Immediately afterwards, a figure appeared out of thin air and slammed his palm down towards Nye Tian. The void trembled violently as a terrifying force exploded out in the blink of an eye. Chapter 3254. The Shield of Heaven Tao. The figure on the left stood in the sky with a pair of emotionless eyes. His murderous intent surged in the air, as if it had solidified. He had not made his move previously, as he was waiting for the perfect opportunity to kill Nye Tian. Nie Tian had almost consumed all his energy after killing 8 people in a row, thus it was the perfect opportunity for the figure on the left to strike. Damn it! Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he let out a groan. It was obvious that the figure on the left had been accumulating his strength for a long time, thus the power it could unleash was unimaginable. He had done it to kill his opponent with a single blow. Even if Nie Tian managed to block the attack, he would still suffer a serious injury. Screw it! At that instant, Nie Tian let out a roar in his heart, causing his blood to erupt as he unleashed his sword intent. Meanwhile, he performed a seal with his hand, causing the force of the heavens and earth to be forcefully shifted in Nie Tian's direction, transforming into streams of energy that surged into Nie Tian's body. At that instant, in addition to burning his blood, Nie Tian was also borrowing the force of the heavens and earth to increase his strength. Nie Tian, die. However, at that very moment, another low roar echoed out from the void. Immediately afterwards, countless streaks of terrifying power converged in the air and swept towards Nie Tian like a raging hurricane. Yuan Ji. Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he glanced at the person who had attacked and uttered his name. The person who had attacked Nie Tian was none other than Yuan Ji. On top of that, Yuan Ji immediately unleashed the full power of the Wuji Heavenly Seal, aiming to kill Nie Tian. On the left, Yuan Ji was flanking Nie Tian from the front and back, placing him in a dilemma. Even with his outstanding strength, he could only block the attack from one person at a time. Yuan Ji's strength was below that of the leader on the left, but the explosive power of his limitless heavenly seal was extremely terrifying. Even Nie Tian's martial body couldn't resist it. Nie Tian. In the distance, Feng Wanhong's eyes trembled as he cried out in surprise. He did not expect Yuan Ji to make a move at this time. As for Bailey Xingxue, he was also startled. His eyes flickered with astonishment. The two of them had been observing the battle the entire time. They had not made a move, because there was a pair of eyes staring at them from afar. This pair of eyes belonged to none other than the guild leader of the Myriad Domains Guild, Zhenjue. It was obvious that the summoner did not wish for the Myriad Domain Guild's martial artists to interfere in the battle before them. There seemed to be some kind of cooperation between the Quasi-Man and the Myriad Ghosts flowing together. In fact, Bailey Xingxue was not too afraid of Zhang Jue. The one he was really worried about was the Ghost Lord, who had not made a move yet. So his attention had always been on the Ghost Lord. However, he did not expect Yuan Ji to interfere at this time and try to kill Nie Tian. Everyone's eyes were trembling and their nerves were stretched to the extreme. They did not even dare to breathe loudly, afraid that they would miss the most exciting scene. Nie Tian was currently on the verge of death. He had no chance of survival. Ruthless people like the leader on the left and Yuan Ji could not be underestimated. Throw caution to the wind, kill! At this time, high up in the sky, Nie Tian let out a roar. His aura exploded to the extreme in an instant as he slashed his sword at Yuan Ji. At this moment, other than surviving, he was also thinking about how to counterattack. The strength of the leader on the left was far above Yuan Ji. Therefore, Nie Tian chose Yuan Ji as his target. Even if he died, he would drag Yuan Ji down with him. When the crowd saw this, their eyes trembled violently, and they were extremely shocked. Nie Tian was too ferocious. He still dared to counterattack at this time. Die! When the leader on the left saw that Nie Tian had completely ignored him, he let out a roar and unleashed his murderous intent. He would not give Nie Tian any chance to escape. He had to kill Nie Tian. Bang! In the next instant, two powerful forces collided with one another in the sky. The blood-colored sword trembled violently as a murderous intent burst out from the sword intent, as if it was going to tear the heavens and earth apart. The slash was executed by Nie Tian by burning his blood and qi. With the help of the force of the heavens and earth, one could imagine how powerful the attack was. Yuan Ji's eyes flickered and his face was filled with terror. He did not expect Nye Tian to unleash such a terrifying force in an instant. What surprised him even more was that Nye Tian was planning to fight him to the death. Bang bang bang. Following this, a terrifying explosion took place in the sky, as if the heavens and earth were about to shatter. Bang bang bang. The Wuji heavenly seals were shattered and devoured by the sword intent. Bang. Following this, a dull thud could be heard as Yuan Ji's figure was sent flying, leaving a trail of blood in the air. He had accumulated his strength and unleashed the strongest attack from the Wuji heavenly seals, but he was still no match against Nye Tian. Instead, he was defeated by Nye Tian. Gasp! The crowd was startled by the scene before them. They inhaled deeply in astonishment. Bang! However, at the same time, a terrifying aura arrived. A raging force surged toward Nye Tian like a surging tide, trying to drown Nye Tian directly. It was the fatal attack from the left hand, which would definitely kill him in one hit. Nye Tian was in midair. He had almost exhausted all of his energy and was on the verge of collapsing. He no longer had the strength to fight back. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. At that moment, on the brink of death, 9 chains suddenly appeared on Nye Tian's body, dancing wildly in the air like 9 giant snakes. Nye Tian let out a surprised cry, before his face was filled with joy. The 9 chains were not the bone-eroding soul-shackling chains, but the heavenly Tao shackles. The heavenly Tao shackles seemed to have sensed the threat and took the initiative to appear, forming a heavenly shield around Nye Tian's body. A strong aura of the heavenly Tao was emitted from Nye Tian's body. Bang! The following instant, a terrifying force struck the heavenly Tao shield, but the majority of its force was nullified. Such a scene caused everyone's eyes to tremble, and they were extremely shocked. Following this, the terrifying force was absorbed by the heavenly Tao shield and returned to Nye Tian's body. Standing in midair, Nye Tian frowned, a confused expression on his face. He had no idea what the heavenly Tao shackles were. Damn it! The left hand was startled for a moment, before he reacted and let out a roar. His eyes flickered with a murderous intent. He had not expected Nye Tian to have such a thing in his body. "Aunt, I'd like to see what other trump cards you have." The left hand roared and took a step forward. His aura surged like a tsunami. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched into a faint smile, as if he had nothing to fear. "Count me in." At that moment, a voice rang out in the air. Following this, a figure stepped through the air and landed beside Nye Tian in an instant. His eyes were sharp and domineering. This figure was none other than the Azure Dragon Star Venerate, boundless desolate ghost. At that moment, Nye Tian felt not just one astral soul resonance, but 2.